This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate second part of What If Naruto Was Kidnapped at Birth. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
All of the steam that had accumulated in the bathroom instantly flowed out and dispersed into the cool, air-conditioned space when Naruto opened the bathroom door. Wearing black shorts and a white muscle shirt, Naruto went out. With his eyes closed and his breath exhaled through his nose, he entered the room with his towel in his right hand, drying his blonde hair. "Hey Naruto-kun," was a voice Naruto recognized from anywhere. He let out a sigh. "Kuretsuchi." He started to say, "Yay," but was interrupted by Kuretsuchi. Her once dark black hair was now half pink and half blue. Her left nostril, each ear, and the spot beneath her black shirt where her belly button would be were all pierced. She looked like she got into a fight with a pair of scissors because her black shirt and pants were tattered. Naruto thought she looked ridiculous overall. "How'd I look?" she asked, and Naruto turned to see Deidara burying his head beneath a pillow to his left. Naruto sighed as he turned back to look at Kuretsuchi. Naruto nodded and said, "Okay, Kuretsuchi, I say this because I care and I'm a friend, so please don't take it the wrong way. But your piercings would set off any metal detector worth the name. You're dressed like Frankenhooker, and your hair has been dyed colors I previously thought existed only in cotton candy." Kuretsuchi scowled. "So, you don't like it?" Naruto groaned in frustration and walked out of the room without saying anything more. Kuretsuchi hung her head in defeat as she watched him leave. "Told you he wouldn't like it," Deidara whispered beneath the headrest. After removing each piercing individually while glaring at him, Kuretsuchi grabbed her hair and threw it at Deidara, who grunted as it struck him. Kuretsuchi yelled, "I'm so going to kill her," as she strode from the room, most likely to her room. Deidara got up from his spot and surveyed the area. He chose to sleep off his headache, even if only for a short while, because it continued to rock his head whenever he moved. "Hey," a voice called out to Hinata. She slowly opened her eyes and saw an elderly man staring back at her. "Wake up," she said. She barely avoided bumping into the elderly man as she blinked and sat up rapidly. As she glanced around, she noticed that she was seated on a park bench, with parents observing the kids as they played in the playground. Hinata was unaware the previous evening that there were a few shogi tables arranged close to the playground. Hinata looked back at the elderly man and his companion. The old man with the cane asked, "Are you all right?" Hinata winced from the pain in her arm, blinked once more, and fixed her gaze on the other elderly man in the wheelchair. Without a word, she left and made her way to the hotel. How she fell asleep in the park was a mystery to her. She watched Naruto go and was unable to recall anything. Everything was a huge blur. She would probably be more exhausted than she initially believed, or perhaps it was the painkillers she took for her arm, if she had to guess. In any event, she made the decision to return to her room in order to take a hot shower and, ideally, relieve the headache that was hammering at her head. Despite having a headache, she was able to make it to the hotel. As she approached her room in the hallway, she noticed Naruto leaving his room. She half hoped he would see her, and half hoped he wouldn't as she froze in terror. When he ignored her and continued walking in the other direction, she felt both relieved and disappointed. With a sigh, she entered her room and pressed her back against the door as she slowly closed it. After gathering her thoughts, Hinata went into the bathroom, undressed, and took the waterproof sling the doctor had given her. Before going into the shower, she put on the waterproof sling again. Soon after, there was the sound of water rushing. The sensation of the water rushing over her was divine. She felt as though some of the pain was being washed away by the water. The rushing water carried away all of the perspiration and grime from her body, and before long, Hinata was just lost in her own thoughts. Why was this the way it had to be? She pondered. Perhaps I should give him some space. I should put him out of my mind, she said, too preoccupied to notice a tear streaming down her cheek. I have a gut feeling that this won't work out, but, she said, pausing to process the information while clenching her fist and gritting her teeth. I simply cannot let him go. The stakes are really high. Konoha, mother, father, the fourth Hokage. He alone could have an impact on all of them. Mother and the fourth would both be extremely happy with him. Hinata winced and relaxed her jaws, realizing how tightly she had clenched them. That didn't stop her from thinking, though. Mother and the fourth didn't get a chance, but it might be too late for me. With her conviction burning strong, Hinata nodded and finished washing herself before exiting the shower and carefully drying off her injured arm. I owe it to them. She changed her sling for a dry one and hung it to dry. Making sure the towel wouldn't fall on its own, she fixed it to fit around her waist and torso. She thanked Kami that the hotel had a new pair of generic clothes for the visitor as she entered the cool, air-conditioned room. She appeared much smaller than she actually was because the white tee was too small for her, but her legs felt like they were wrapped in clouds thanks to the cozy fit of the gray sweatpants. She heard a knock on the other side of the door just as she got to the doorknob. She listened intently as she asked, who is it? From the other side, she heard a frustrated sigh. She snarled, Kuretsuchi, and Hinata was hesitant to open the door. Given the acerbic tone of her voice, it's likely that she discovered Hinata had deceived her. Not entirely, but that wasn't the main point. Hinata opened the door and braced herself, taking in what might have been her final breath. It surprised Hinata that Kuretsuchi didn't yell at her directly. The absence of sound from the usually boisterous and animated black-haired girl actually frightened her. Once more, Hinata did not anticipate the answer to the question, "What did you do to him?" She was caught off guard. With bewilderment on her face, Hinata said, "I'm sorry?" When Kuretsuchi rephrased, "Why is Naruto so upset?" Hinata's expression changed to one of realization. "I didn't do anything," she said with difficulty, averting her gaze from Kuretsuchi. "He just didn't take the news so well." Kuretsuchi gave a headshake. "If it wasn't for you, he would have noticed how awesome I looked earlier." Hinata merely gave her a disbelieving glance. All of the ridiculous things Hinata had told her the previous evening were truly believed by this girl. With a drop of perspiration, Hinata thought, "Love is blind." She crinkled her eyes and feigned an apologetic smile while tilting her head to the left. The aftertaste those words left in her mouth made Hinata want to go wash her teeth once more. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said. "Go fix this," replied Kuretsuchi. It seemed more like a demand than a suggestion, and Hinata nodded. After a brief stroll around Kuretsuchi, Hinata left to find Naruto in the hopes of making him feel better before upsetting him even more. When she departed, Kuretsuchi sighed and watched her go. In an attempt to expedite the search, Hinata turned on her Byakugan and started looking around. "Naruto, where have you gone? Oh, perhaps he is avoiding me or has left. It's possible that I won't locate him until he requests it. Perhaps." She scowled at these ideas. No matter what stood in her way, she had to have faith in her skills and that she would find him. With a sigh, she rubbed her eyes and turned off her Byakugan. She still needed to exert herself to maintain her Kekkei Genkai activated for long stretches of time because she was exhausted. It was unfortunate that she had to cancel her Byakugan outside a store because Hinata walked straight into a door that opened at that very moment. Holding her forehead, she collapsed onto her back. She was grateful that the full force of the blow was absorbed by her forehead. Mumbling, "Oh, ow," she said. She blinked, opened her eyes, and saw Naruto standing above her. "I'm sorry, she said. When she saw who he had hit, he stopped abruptly. Hinata noticed a hint of annoyance on his face, but it was greatly overshadowed by concern. Naruto asked, "Hinata-chan, are you okay?" and held out his right hand to assist her in standing up. She took his hand in her good hand, nodded her head, and got to her feet. She felt panic rise in her stomach as she gazed at him. The bright side is that she found him. Perhaps her luck was turning. Wearing her Hokage robes, Kushina greeted everyone she passed with a joyful smile. She had one of the greatest experiences of her life, just short of realizing her dream of starting a family. The Hokage was her. Even though it would end as soon as Minato got back, she wasn't going to let the chance to sit behind the Hokage's desk pass her by. Following a brief bow and nod, the villagers said, "Good afternoon," to her. As she paused to visit Ichiraku's ramen bar, the restaurant with the best food in the world, she thought, "Oh yeah, it's good being Hokage." As he greeted Kushina at his restaurant, Tucci said, "Well, if it isn't the first female Hokage, what can I do for you?" Kushina laughed and smiled brightly as he acknowledged Tucci. Kushina put her right fist in the air and shouted, "The usual, Grand Chef, I'm in the mood to eat until I'm in a ramen coma, Databane," and responded. Tucci laughed and carried on the joke, "Of course, yes Lady Hokage," before beginning to fulfill Kushina's request. Kushina looked around, taking in everything, and hummed to herself. After hearing Tucci scoff, Kushina inquired, "So, where's Ayame?" Tucci responded, "Off with her loser boyfriend, from the kitchen." Holding on to her seat to keep from falling off, Kushina laughed at his response. "The Anbu captain? A loser? No sir," Kushina chuckled as he heard someone else in the kitchen scoff. She let out another roar of laughter. When Tucci didn't respond, she devised a scheme to annoy the older man. "I trained the brat myself and let me tell you, he's no loser," she said. When Kushina saw Tucci's face, she burst out laughing and fell from her seat. "And he has incredible stamina, or so Ayame tells me," she said. Tucci's anger was hilarious and well worth the stares, so she didn't care who looked at her. While laughing, Kushina looked up to see her godson's stoic face. "I see you continue to torture me, even after Anbu graduation. Lady Hokage, she said. There was a slight upward bend in the corner of his lips, so he wasn't entirely stoic. You bet, Databane, exclaimed Kushina. Kushina said, come, sit with me, Itachi, and the Anbu captain complied. At the moment, he was wearing his civilian attire, which included a weapons pouch fastened to his right leg and black shorts and a shirt with the Uchiha's emblem prominently displayed on the back. Tucci asked in a quiet, low voice, where's Ayame? Itachi flinched, and Kushina laughed. Although it was difficult to catch, Kushina had known Itachi long enough to recognize the warning signs. She's home, resting, Itachi gave in response. Itachi's perspiration fell when Kushina and Tucci asked, from what? Tucci peered out of the kitchen to give Itachi a stern look. Training. I was teaching Ayame how to throw a kunai and shuriken, along with how to get out of particular holds should she ever encounter herself in a troubling situation, he said. If it weren't for Itachi's nervous finger twitches, his poker face would have been flawless. Kushina said, leave the poor boy alone, and slammed her right hand down on the table. Kushina commanded, as Hokage, I demand you to continue my ramen, and Tucci muttered something under his breath. What was that? Nothing, he replied, perspiring. She smirked and said, damn right nothing, before turning to face Itachi. She said, so how's the Anbuing business going? And Itachi let out a sigh. He pulled a Pocky out of his pocket and ate it for a few minutes without making any noise. He shook his head when he saw Kushina's angry expression. Tough, some of the older members are still giving me trouble for being younger than them, he said. Itachi paced Kushina and said, it's fine, though. Eventually, they'll get over it, before moving on to his Pocky. Itachi casually inquired, what's up with the get up? Before continuing, Kushina pouted at Itachi, but he ignored her. Lord Hokage forgot to lock up his Hokage robes again? She said. She screamed, no. And then stuck her tongue out at him. He went looking for Hinata-chan and he left me in charge. Itachi turned to look at her and blinked. Why in Kami's name would he do that? Itachi grinned and said, you know what? This is why I like to torture you. Itachi was about to bite into it when Kushina sneered and grabbed a Pocky from him. So how's Sasuke-kun? Itachi paused. Kushina said, he's good, still a little worried, and nodded. When Kushina said, I should think so, he was serious, considering he and Hinata-chan have been friends since the beginning of the academy and of what happened 3 months ago. According to Itachi, yeah, I know, he's been training non-stop since he's heard of her disappearance. Kushina said, looks like he's taking it well, while she continued to bite into her Pocky. Still, does he? Yes, Itachi replied, anticipating her question. Well, does he know that she doesn't? Yes. Do you think he'll? Itachi responded once more, my brother is many things, but one thing he isn't is stupid, to which Kushina scowled. You know it bothers when you. Itachi grinned and looked at Kushina out of the corner of his eye. I know, godmother, he said. He saw that she was affected in the way he had intended. Before killing Itachi, she shifted the topic and inquired, so how are your old folks? That made Itachi laugh a little. Father is still an ass, she said. He shook his head and said, mother is still the same. Kushina laughed. How she puts up with him, I'll never know, and Itachi laughed once. Kushina remarked, love is a weird thing, it's what's keeping Tucci from killing you right where you sit. Itachi laughed once more and got up. I suppose, he said, setting a Pocky on the table before turning to go. Tucci muttered to himself, it was nice seeing you again, godmother. You as well, Tucci, and waved slowly. As she put the Pocky in her mouth, Kushina exclaimed, I'll see you later, Itachi-kun. A cleaver nearly struck the back of his head as he turned to the left. Ha, you missed. Tucci said, and went back to work without saying anything more. Suddenly, the ramen bar was silent for a long time. When he finally snapped, Kushina asked, where's my food? It's a lot of food. Tucci shot back. Are you calling me fat? Tucci remained silent. Kushina said, smart man, and then she put her elbows on the counter and cupped her cheeks, wondering what her husband was doing. Minato let out a sneeze. Usually, a sneeze is just a sneeze, regardless of the occasion or cause. But silence was essential in his current situation. The silence was broken by Minato's sneeze, which made the 6 rogue nin they were hiding from know where they were. Minato muttered, great, and turned to face his group. Just as the rogue nin started to run toward Minato and Obito, Heishi and Kakashi nodded and fled. Heishi. Follow Kakashi as he continues following the trail. Heishi and I will deal with the rogue nin. Obito, you're with me, they said. Nice timing, Obito remarked, drawing a kunai and bringing his Sharingan to life. Minato's perspiration stopped. I know. After completing his team drills with Shino and Kurenai, Kiba sighed. The training seemed counterproductive and pointless without Hinata. Kurenai attempted to defend it by claiming that it would enable them to become less reliant on Hinata, but even he could see that she wasn't sincere. Without his Ga teammate, Konoha simply wasn't the same. Inuzuka, went a voice. Kiba came to a halt and looked at the voice. When he saw who it was, he moaned. Sasuke, who goes by Uchiha, has onyx eyes and spiky black hair that has a blue tint. Compared to his older brother Itachi, he has lighter skin. His cheeks are roughly framed by his hair that falls over both sides of his face. He was dressed similarly to Itachi, with the exception that he had a katana dangling from his back and his shirt was blue rather than black. Kiba sneered as he asked, "You heard word of Hinata?" Kiba snarled, "What's it to you?" And Sasuke scowled in response. "I'm not here to fight, Inuzuka. I just want to know if you know anything about Hinata since her disappearance." Harshly, "No, I haven't," Kiba said. After assessing Kiba's expression, Sasuke nodded and turned to leave. Kiba abruptly interrupted Sasuke by asking, "What do you care?" "What? Ever since you got your own tutor, you've distanced yourself from us," Kiba remarked grimly. "Since when do you care?" "I've always cared," was Sasuke's candid response. "I might not show it but I do care. Especially about Hinata." "Chan," Sasuke uttered, muttering the final sentence. But when Kiba heard him, his eyes widened a little. Kiba said, "You love her," and Sasuke looked back into his eyes. He replied, "I Doa," and Kiba clenched his fist. He said, "I'm not losing to you," and Sasuke just stared silently. Then he turned to leave, grinning. Sasuke mocked, challenged accepted, mutt, and Kiba snarled. Kiba muttered, "Brat," and then turned to leave as well. Given Hinata Chan's kindness and beauty, I knew pursuing her wouldn't be simple, but what if Sasuke was vying for her affection? Kiba gave a headshake. He muttered, "Things have just gotten a lot more complicated." As she blushed and blinked repeatedly, Hinata was considering what she would say to Naruto. She was currently in the park where she and Naruto had spoken the previous evening. He was pondering while seated on the bench beside her. She assumed he was checking that he could accurately put his ideas into words because he told her he wanted to tell her something but then fell silent. She was doing the same thing, so she didn't blame him. Naruto muttered, "Hinata," before turning to face her. She looked him in the eyes and acknowledged him with a nod. She nodded once more. "First of all, thank you for giving me time to think," she said. She smiled and said, "Sure thing Naruto-kun," and Naruto turned his head away, hoping he could hide his blush. He looked at Hinata once more after pausing for a few minutes to ensure he wouldn't blush. "If you want me to believe that you weren't lying to me yesterday, I want you to look me in the eyes," she replied. "And tell me that you weren't lying." As she gazed into his eyes and soul, Hinata swallowed. She realized that lying to him would have crushed him on the inside. She said, "I promise that I didn't," and Naruto kept staring into her eyes to determine whether or not she was telling the truth. She went on, "Yeah, I don't like to lie, Naruto-kun." Naruto checked again, and Hinata's shyness started to show. She flushed more deeply. With a firm, "I didn't lie to you," Hinata said. She stumbled a little when she said, "I really do like you," but Naruto could tell she meant it. Naruto blinked at her outburst, but then came back with a smile after giving it some thought. "What do I have to do to prove to you that I'm not lying?" she asked. Hinata blinked and glanced down at her fingers. "Tell me something nobody else in this world knows about," she said. Hinata looked back at him and swallowed. "And just to make it fair, if I feel that you're telling me the truth, I'll do the same," she said. "You will?" he asked, nodding. "Promise?" he asked, nodding once more while maintaining a solemn expression. She looked at her fingers and flushed once more. She was hesitant to share one of her darkest secrets with him, but after giving it some serious thought, she concluded that it was worthwhile. That he was valuable. She muttered to herself, "I once tried to kill myself." With such intense focus that everything else in his world faded, Naruto gazed at her. He made an effort to determine whether she was telling the truth, but he could tell she was. His eyes then grew wide. Why?" he inquired. "I couldn't handle the pressure of being the Ga clan heiress," she said with a mocking laugh and a headshake. "Worse, my first mother died a couple months after my heiress training began, and I just couldn't take it." Naruto kept his sorrowful gaze fixed on her. "What stopped you?" Hinata chuckled at this. "My second mother, but I call her mother now." Hinata shook her head and asked, "Your father remarried?" "She was a family friend, but she was like a second mother. She helped my father take care of me after my real mother died. She really helped me get out of my depression and even gave me confidence to continue living, even though she doesn't know it." He inquired, how did you try to kill yourself? Her response was, I tried to drown myself. I woke up in the hospital the next day. My second mother says she found me while she was out training somewhere near. Naruto wisely counseled, you should have bled to death, it works faster. Hinata looked at him like he was crazy. Trust me, you always float to the top when you try to drown yourself, she said. Naruto nodded in response to her question, you tried to kill yourself before? Naruto gazed up at the sky with nostalgia. Many times, all failed attempts, all seemed like an accident so nobody asked too many questions, he said. After my 5th attempt, I just stopped taking the easy way out. She asked, a little unsure and annoyed, so is that what you were going to tell me? But Naruto shook his head. He turned to her and grinned. Nah, it's not what I was going to say, he said. He told her, I'm planning a coup, and Hinata blinked and tilted her head to the left in a cute way. When she asked, What? I'm sick and tired of the old fool, Naruto said. Naruto grinned wearily as he looked down at his feet and said, he's getting too old and is going senile, he doesn't know how to lead. Oh, was Hinata's only response. I'm gonna become the new Tsuchikage and I'll make sure that Iwa prospers, like it was made to do, Naruto proudly announced. Hinata crinkled her eyes and watched him closely before grinning. Hinata said, I'm sure you'll make a great Tsuchikage, and Naruto gave her a quick glance before grinning and blushing slightly. Thanks, and if you need help, Hinata said boldly, taking Naruto's hand in her left. Naruto's blush deepened as he said, I'm here, and he gave a stupid nod. And I have a few friends who'll help you without a second thought. Thank you, Naruto grinned as he looked directly into Hinata's eyes. Hinata-chan. With hope shining in her eyes, she said, so, you forgive me? Naruto paused to nod his head. She didn't particularly enjoy the hesitation, but she was willing to accept it as long as he was forgiving. Hinata nodded in comprehension. But it'll take a while before I can completely trust you, she said. She said, I get it, and Naruto grinned appreciatively. Then, attempting to ignore the fact that they were still holding hands and that they were sitting close to each other, the two turned their attention to other things. Hinata nodded as Naruto tragically remarked, we should probably head back to the hotel, we're heading for Iwa today and then we'll let Konoha know that we found you. As they stood and started to move in the direction of the hotel, she finally released his hand. Naruto asked, how's your arm? And Hinata examined it. She replied, it's healing. It hurts when I move it a certain way but it's okay. Observing that Naruto was staring at her arm, or perhaps her breasts. She blushed and questioned that idea, but she started to believe it after noticing the deep flush on his cheeks. Naruto whimpered, then looked ahead, asking, Area A. Are you looking at my B? Breasts? N. Naruto.kun? He started running down the street before she had even finished uttering his name. Naruto.kun. She exclaimed as she started to follow him, and she could hear him chuckle in the background. Despite the inappropriateness of what he did, she couldn't help but smile. A silhouette watched Hinata run from the shadows. The silhouette muttered, time is running out for you, my prey, before shifting his eerie eyes to Naruto, who was just around the bend. The shadow laughed and turned to his guest. And for you as well, my rival, he said. Neiko twirled her pure blue hair with her right index finger and asked, why haven't you attacked them yet? With a growl, the man started to leave. She purred angrily, I disposed of his sensei for you but you let the opportunity slide past your fingers, but the man kept on walking away. The man said, I choose when it's time to attack, now leave me. Satisfied by the occasional popping sound, Neiko simply stared at the man before letting out a sigh and stretching. Neiko was stretching when a man on a bike happened to walk by. After staring at her for a long time, he rushed into the water fountain and immediately fell in. After blinking and surveying her surroundings, Neiko shrugged her shoulders and left, her demonic cat tail and ears fading as she entered the sunlight. There was more to being a rogue ninja than meets the eye. Avoiding Hunter.nin when they were discovered was even more difficult, given that they had to ensure that their trail was undetectable to almost everyone. The teenager walked down the subterranean corridor, letting out a sigh. He hasn't seen sunlight or felt a cool breeze on his face in days. He missed being in nature, and he knew that without some fresh air, he would soon lose his mind. It's okay, he muttered to himself. As long as I'm not dead, eventually I'll be outside again. But it wasn't all bad. The teenager had learned many things as a rogue nin, including strong techniques that he probably would not have been able to use if he had remained in his village. Mother. Father. He said, recalling the tragedies in his hometown when he thought of his former village. He pushed the sadness aside and walked on toward his makeshift room. The teenager looked down at his new attire. He was shielded from the outside world by a black robe with red clouds. A pale blue sleeveless shirt, matching pants, and shoes were worn underneath it. He had a body mesh underneath his sleeveless shirt. The Akatsuki, he muttered to himself. Even after more than a year of being in the Akatsuki with his master, he was still unable to make himself like the uniform. Nevertheless, he joined the group for the stable income and jobs they offered, not for their sense of style. The teenager looked up to see his master standing in the center of the hallway after sensing a presence in front of him. The teenager winced at his master's stern and acerbic tone. "What are you gawking at?" Despite his reluctance to express it, he knew his master loved him. He simply did it that way. His master merely grinned and said, "I'm sorry," with gauze wrapped around his lower face. His words were, "Go get ready," the teenager said, blinking. "Leader has a job for us," then grinned. His master nodded, and the teenager ran to his makeshift room. "We get to go outside?" he asked. His medical kit and a few extra weapons were all he really needed, but he didn't hear a second set of footsteps because he was so excited. The giant man yelled, "Nice kid you have there," which irritated the teen's master. However, rather than confronting the man, he simply left. When Kisame heard the words, "Shove it up your ass, Kisame," he simply laughed and turned to leave. Kisame continued to wander aimlessly until he ran into his partner. "I just love messing with him," he said. The man was at least 4 feet tall due to the enormous hunch on his back. His partner could be mistaken for a fat old man with a back issue in comparison to the giant Kisame. When Sasori said, "Kisame, we need to go," Kisame laughed. Sasori nodded, and Kisame flashed his shark-like teeth in response. "We got a job? Where to?" Sasori's eyes shone with excitement and mischief. "Iwa." As Naruto and Hinata made their way to Iwa, Onyx's eyes were fixed on them. Since leaving the Hidden Star Village this morning, they have been running, stopping occasionally. At the moment, it was barely past 8, and the man's patience was wearing thin. To be honest, the black-haired girl was constantly glaring at the white-eyed prey and conversing with the blonde one. No one, not even a brat with black hair, would take her away from him. She was his prey. The man ignored the brown-haired boy because he didn't appear to be worth hunting. The man with the blonde hair caught his dark gaze. He was a big problem. He would have to eliminate the blonde man first if he intended to kill his blonde prey and still capture the white-eyed prey. How would he do that? The question was. He hummed softly to himself as his mind worked through several possible solutions to his issue. He glanced at the setting sun one last time. Soon. A voice purred, "What ya doin'?" and the man snarled. The man said, "What is it you want, demon?" and Neko laughed. "Just wondering what you're doing, my pretty," the man said, turning to look at Neko questioningly. Then he looked back down as a thought suddenly came to him. He pointed to Deidara and said, "See that man?" Neko narrowed her eyes. After saying, "He looks familiar, Buddha," she snapped her fingers and grinned. She exclaimed, "Ah yes, I know him," but the man's right hand quickly silenced her. He muttered, "Quiet fool," and Neko gave him a scowl. The man took his hand out of her mouth when he noticed that it was losing sensation. She had licked his hand, as he could see. She proudly puffed out her chest and asked, "Like it? It's my kiss of death," the man said with a somber expression. He commanded, "I want you to keep the man busy," and Neko sulked. She whimpered, "I don't wanna," and the man snarled. After a while, she nodded and sighed, "Fine." The man said, "Good," before returning his focus to his victim. Neko merely purred and trailed behind the man as he monitored his kill. "We'll strike on my command," he said. With a sigh, Minato trailed behind Kakashi and his Ninken. He was followed by Obito and Heishi, who were beginning to feel nervous. The trail grew fainter and the group's mood worsened as more time went by. Obito remarked, "Nice going back there, by the way," and Minato moaned. Minato said, "Let it go, I said I was sorry, for the 10th time since the rogue ninja incident." Obito went on, "If it didn't happen, we wouldn't be so behind," and winced when Minato halted her stride. His expression was passive as he turned to face Obito. Obito gulped with wide eyes, knowing that his sensei would follow through on his threat. "If you mention this again, Obito, you will be tasked to find the daimyo's wife's cat every time she runs away for the next year," he said. "That feline devil, that cat." Heishi said, "Minato," attracting Minato's attention. With a sigh, Minato said, "Calm down, we need to focus," and turned to resume their journey. Wanting to put some distance between himself and his sensei, Obito took a moment longer to continue. Obito complained, and Kakashi sighed, "Damn it Kakashi, how much longer till we find her?" Kakashi responded, "You rush a miracle worker, you get lousy miracles," and Minato couldn't help but smile. Obito asked impatiently, "Is it really that hard to do?" And Kakashi rolled his eyes. Obito was not happy with his response, but he chose to ignore it so as not to offend the Hyuga patriarch. Apparently, he said. Obito uttered, "So Minato. Sensei." Minato turned to face Obito, staring him in the eyes. "You left your wife in charge of Konoha, huh? Was that really such a wise choice?" Minato asked. Everyone waited for his response. Minato's three friends all started to perspire. "You know Obito, I'm not completely sure," they said. Under his mask, Kakashi grinned as he continued, "I just needed someone I trusted to take care of my village while I'm away, and there's no one in the world I trust more than my wife." "Nice answer," Obito said with a silly smile. When Heishi said, "You know she's going to put things off and will probably leave most, if not all, of the paperwork to you when you return." Minato bowed his head and let his eyes well up with feigned tears. "I know," his friends chuckled at his suffering. All of a sudden, the group was in a battlefield. Each of them surveyed the clearing, taking in everything. It appeared as though a small army had invaded the area and started a real conflict. There were gouges in the ground, some deep, some shallow. The reflecting pool was much shallower than it should have been, and there were trees on the ground. The place appeared awful overall. As Obito looked around, he said, "Whoa, looks like someone went a little overboard in their training." Kakashi turned to face him, his face deadpan. Kakashi insulted, "Only you would think the cause of this mess was training," to which Obito sneered and protruded his tongue. All 7 of Kakashi's dogs proceeded to the widest and deepest gouge after one of them barked. For several minutes, they conversed with each other in their mother tongue. The other members of the group who didn't speak dog could only speculate as to what was being said, but based on their body language and facial expressions, it appeared that they were having a disagreement. The Ninken exchanged glances before Pakun approached Kakashi and his group. "Report," Kakashi ordered. "Well," Pakun began, taking a moment to compose the appropriate sentence. "Here's the thing. The guy's scent we found yesterday is here, in that big gouge in the ground," he said. Pakun gave Obito a little glare when he said, "Yeah, so? So, there's another scent in there as well." Pakun shook his head when Heishi asked, "Is it Hinata's?" Obito, growing irritated with the entire situation, questioned, "So, what does it matter? Really, all he wanted was to get home." Pakun turned to face Minato, ignoring the annoying Uchiha. Pakun asked, "Do you mind if I sniff you?" Minato looked at him curiously. Pakun nodded in response to his question, "Does it involve what we're doing now?" With a nod, Minato observed in silence as one of Kakashi's dogs sniffed him. "That's what I thought," the pug remarked as he made his way back to friends. Everyone was shocked to learn that the other scent in there is similar to your scent, Minato. "What?" Minato questioned, his expression filled with incredulity. Pakun said, "It's not exactly like yours, but it is similar, and yet, it also reminds me of your wife." "This is weird," Obito uttered out loud. "It's not only me who think that, is it?" "That's a..." Minato mentioned Naruto as her first thought. "It's impossible. Have I at last located my son?" With his heart pounding and his muscles stiffening, he thought. As Minato turned to face him, Heishi said, "Minato," with a doubtful expression, "I don't want you to get hurt, my friend, so let's not jump to conclusions just yet." Had Minato followed his instincts, he would have asked Pakun to find the scent instead of Heishi. He didn't want to let it go because it was a tiny hope that he would actually find his son. He realized that he was in the same predicament as Heishi. This was no way for him to leave his friend. It would not be equitable. Pakun said, "Good news though," before anyone else could speak. When Minato and Heishi said, "Both Hinata's and the other scent are together," they both smiled, hope glimmering in their eyes. Obito exclaimed, "Well, what are we waiting for?" Based on Minato's expression, Kakashi said, "Let's get it on." Minato simply grinned and gave him the thumbs up. Kakashi gave the order, "Let's go," and the dogs started following the scent. This is it, Minato thought as he followed Kakashi in the hopes of obtaining his son and goddaughter. Steady breathing. That was the only sound heard in the Hokage's office, and nobody was able to identify the source. The Hokage's office was empty except for a massive stack of documents that nearly reached the ceiling. Itachi felt a great deal of confusion. As he entered the room, he said, "Lady Hokage?" When Sasuke asked, "Brother, what are we doing here?" Itachi glared at him to silence him. Then Itachi resumed his search for Kushina. As he walked around the desk, he noticed that the paperwork extended over the chair as well. Itachi made quick hand gestures and then exhaled a powerful breeze before deciding to look beneath the documents. Until not a single paper was left on the desk, the papers were scattered throughout the room. A woman with long red hair was sleeping on top of the desk, and Sasuke just blinked. Itachi tapped Kushina's shoulder gently and said, "Lady Hokage?" but withdrew his hand as Kushina stood up and tried to grasp it. She glanced at Sasuke and Itachi and blinked. She wiped the drool from the corner of her lip and said, "Huh? What are you two doing in my office?" Itachi bowed and said, "I came by to ask for a favor," to which Kushina grinned. She sat down on the chair and said, "Sure, ask away, then." Kushina casually remarked, "Whoa, that's a lot of paperwork. Good thing I don't have to deal with it." When Kushina glared at Sasuke, he gulped and said, "Actually, you do, don't you?" Itachi said, "As I was saying, in an attempt to prevent his younger brother from being killed by his surrogate mother, I wish to nominate my brother for the rank of Nin." Sasuke and Kushina were both taken aback by this. Sasuke sputtered incredulously, what? Quickly regaining her composure, Kushina leaned back in her chair and hummed as she processed her thoughts. "Noah," was her response, and Itachi's brows knitted. "At least, I'm not going to give it to him on a silver platter. Lady Hokage, if I may." She raised her right hand and exclaimed, "You can stop right there, Itachi, I know what you were going to say." Itachi simply arched a morbidly fascinated eyebrow. "Oh, do you?" Kushina gave a nod. "You were going to give me this whole lecture on how quickly Sasuke is progressing and how great he is," she said. "And I'm not going to disagree with you. Kakashi's reports have shown that Sasuke has learned everything he's been taught so far, and half the time, he wasn't using the Sharingan." Itachi put a hand on Sasuke's shoulder and he grinned proudly. Kushina paused in the middle of her statement to add dramatic effect. "Still, I have other plans for him," she said. Itachi questioned suspiciously, "What plans?" And Kushina gave him a cheeky smile. "Well, the Nin exams are coming up, and I have a team that is missing one of their members," she said in a sing-song voice. Sasuke's eyes squinted a bit. He firmly stated, "I'm not taking Hinata's place," which made Kushina frown. "That's not your choice," Kushina concluded, grinning. "I had Kurenai already ask her team and they'd love to have you," she stated to him. Sasuke arched an incredulous eyebrow. Kushina began to perspire. "Well, not completely true, but they're willing to work with you, so there's that." Sasuke begged, "Lady Hokage, please reconsider," but Kushina held up another hand to silence him. "My decision is final. With you instructor gone, you have nothing to do and you need to brush up on your teamwork. You shall meet them at training ground 12 Ada." Kushina glanced at the wall clock. 10 minutes ago. Sasuke and Itachi simply gazed at her as though she had developed a second head. Sasuke gazed at Kushina for a moment longer before he sighed. "Well, don't just stand there. Get to it, chop chop," Kushina said. Sasuke said, "Yes, Lady Hokage," and then he left. After observing his brother depart, Itachi turned to face Kushina. He said, "Seems a little irrational," and Kushina gave him a knowing nod. Kushina stated, "Most Uchihas are," and then raised her hands in defense. "No offense." Itachi said, "No, it's fine, I should have seen that one coming," which made Kushina laugh. When he said, "Seriously, is this something you thought out?" Kushina folded her arms across her chest and pouted. "I'm offended. You should be." She gave a scowl. She told him, "If you must know, Minato-kun suggested this before he left," and Itachi nodded after taking note. He said, "I see," and bowed. He hurried to the door and then ducked as Kushina threw a vase at his head, saying, "I'll be on my way then." He grinned and muttered, "You're getting closer," before leaving and shutting the door. Kushina simply snorted and turned to the room's documents. She leaned back in the chair and sighed. "I hate this," she said, gazing sorrowfully at the ceiling with violet eyes. "Come back home soon, Minato. Kuna, I miss you." She leaned back with a melancholy smile on her lips as the dream she had while sleeping beneath the paperwork came back to her. She gave herself a hug while crossing her arms over her chest. It was a lovely dream. In her dream, she was holding Naruto. As she held him close to her, the bright, sun-kissed mop of hair on his head tickled her cheek. As she tickled his stomach, she even pictured him laughing. Abruptly, Kushina stepped forward and struck the desk with her fist. Her shoulders trembled and her muscles tensed. "My baby," she exclaimed, her eyes welling with tears. She hadn't sobbed over this in a long time, but every now and then it hit her like a ton of bricks. Although they were few in number, they would strike her with great force when they did. She sobbed for a long time, much longer than normal. However, she noticed that her tears were beginning to stop after a while. She wiped her eyes and studied the documents. With a sigh, she got up and decided she might as well start working. No one objected to her having a late-night snack, so Kushina stopped and went into the closet. For the 1000th time that day, Naruto glanced around. The hairs on the back of his head were always standing straight, and his nerves were tense. He didn't know what was happening, but something was happening. Naruto? Naruto asked, blinking as he glanced at Hinata, who was seated next to him. Daichi was eating a ration bar next to her. Beside him was Deidara, who was also consuming a ration bar, but in a more restrained manner than Daichi, who appeared to have gone days without eating. Hinata asked, "Are you okay?" And Naruto turned to face the fire that kept everyone warm while nodding. However, given her proximity to Naruto, it appears that Kuretsuchi was not absorbing any of the heat. In addition to the invasion of his personal space, Hinata also didn't seem to be in the best of moods. "Peachy," replied Naruto. Kuretsuchi merely hummed when Naruto asked, "Warm enough, yet?" "I'll let you know when I'm good," she said. Naruto let out a sigh. So, Hinata began, drawing Naruto's focus. Deidara nodded in response to Hinata's question, "We're going to Iwa first and then you guys are sending a message to Konoha?" He replied, "That's right, and then went on with his meal." "I see," she uttered, almost excitedly. Naruto gave her a sidelong glance before turning back to the fire. Then he turned to face his sensei and stood. Without allowing Deidara to speak, he said, "I'm going to go train," and turned to leave. He simply shrugged after blinking. "Wait!" exclaimed Hinata as she got up and pursued him. After gritting her teeth, Kuretsuchi chased after the two. All that was left was for Daichi and Deidara to blink at their forms before turning to face one another. A grin appeared on their lips as a thought struck them simultaneously. They both exclaimed, "Their ration bars are mine!" At the same time. The fire had gone from bright orange and yellow to an even brighter blue and white before they actually stood up. This stopped the two from moving. "Hello, my pretties," the voice said, and Deidara's eyes widened a little because it sounded so familiar. After hearing a faint thump behind them, the two turned to see who or what was causing it and were met by a blue-haired beauty wearing ragged black clothing. Daichi exclaimed with joy, "Hiya!" before recoiling as the girl pulled out two kunai. After exchanging glances, Deidara and Daichi sighed. At that moment, Naruto suddenly remembered an old proverb. Anything that has the potential to go wrong will. As Hinata bore Kuretsuchi's verbal abuse, she remained emotionless and passive. "Why don't you just leave him alone? It's obvious he left to get away from you," Kuretsuchi said wisely. Hinata told her, "It's okay if you don't like me, but I need to talk to Naruto-kun about something," but Kuretsuchi simply continued to glare. Naruto rolled his eyes and watched the discussion go on. "And hurt him again?" "I don't think so," he said. However, since Kuretsuchi was merely attempting to defend him, much like a friend, Naruto was unable to fully anger her. He was no longer a young boy, though, and she needed to understand that he was now capable of handling his own problems. "Kuretsuchi," Naruto uttered in a flat voice. She noticed the seriousness in his eyes as she looked at him. It was not necessary to speak either. She turned to Hinata, scowling and blinking. Although she didn't want to speak with Naruto, she couldn't stop him from doing so if he so desired. With a "fine," she left Naruto and Hinata alone and started to return to camp. Naruto sat down on the ground after the two simply stared at one another. Hinata approached him and sat on her knees in front of him. With a forced smile, Naruto said, "So, what's going on?" Though it wasn't as forced as Naruto's, Hinata also grinned. "I have a few things I want to talk about," she stated, "mostly about us." Naruto said, "Okay," stifling his panic. He wanted to discuss that with Hinata as well, but not until they arrived in Iwa. He's so unlucky. Hinata took a moment to review her ideas and the words she intended to use. With a faint sigh, Naruto heard movement in the forest. Naruto voiced, "Go away, Kuretsuchi," loudly enough for her to hear. Hinata inhaled deeply before turning to face the region Naruto was observing. Hinata activated her Kekkei Genkai when nothing emerged. In fact, she could see Kuretsuchi hiding behind a tree. However, her network of chakras. Kuretsuchi laughed sheepishly as she emerged from her hiding place. She said, "I couldn't resist," as she turned to face Naruto. Naruto growled and got to his feet the moment they made contact. He approached Kuretsuchi, took her by the collar, and lifted her off the ground. Kuretsuchi blinked in perplexity as Naruto questioned, "Who the hell do you think you are?" "Wah." The earth trembled as Naruto slammed her into the ground before she could say anything more. Hinata yelled, "Naruto-kun," and got up to stop him. Unknowingly turning to face her, Naruto revealed his crimson, fox-like eyes. He told her, "Stay back," before Kuretsuchi kicked him back. Kuretsuchi leapt to her feet as he flipped and landed on his feet, growling. After rolling her neck, she heard popping noises and let out a sigh. Naruto growled at the imposter, "You're not Kuretsuchi," and she gave him a cunning smile. Naruto wanted to tear the imposter's face off when she asked him sweetly, "What gave me away?" Kuretsuchi stated, "Many things, but mostly, it was the eyes," with a pout and a head tilt. "Well, that's unfortunate for me," she said, but as she pulled out a kunai, a smirk came to her lips. She flicked the kunai in Hinata's direction without any prior notice or warning. Hinata drew her own kunai and deflected the projectile before the kunai could reach her. With her dislocated arm, it was a little difficult to get her into a defensive stance, but Hinata succeeded. With little to no patience, Naruto exclaimed, "Who the hell are you?" Kuretsuchi simply laughed, her once feminine voice giving way to a darker, deeper one. The image of Kuretsuchi transformed into the man who had abducted Hinata. "I go by Hiroku," Hiroku said. "You." Naruto exhaled sharply, taken aback by the sudden development. Abruptly, he became enraged and gave the man a glare. Hiroku made hand signals and said, "I'm glad you remember me, my prey," which caused Naruto to pause and get ready. He spat up water and yelled, "Water style." Exploding water shockwave. Then, using his chakra to control it, he produced a tiny wave and rode on top of it, making his way toward Naruto. In order to wait for the wave to stop, Hinata leapt up a tree and used her chakra to adhere her feet to the bark. Naruto turned to face Hiroku as he ran towards the wave and used his chakra to give himself the boost he needed to jump over it and land on top of it. The wave turned around and headed back toward Naruto as Hiroku turned. Naruto made hand signals, sucking in as much as he could and using some of the kya by his chakra to boost the power of his jutsu. Fire style. Dragon flame bomb. Naruto's mouth exploded with a savage looking dragon of fire that struck the tidal wave, turning it to steam. Standing on top of the water, Naruto kept his senses sharp and looked around. As he did, he paused to catch his breath. Controlling the fire in that manner required a great deal of focus and concentration. He was relieved that Roshi required him to meditate frequently because otherwise, his jutsu would have appeared to be a flaming explosion and would not have been as powerful. Naruto could hardly hear Hiroku say, "Water style," but he was able to understand what he was whispering. He still didn't know the bastard's location. Water Dragon Jutsu. As it approached Naruto, a beast roared in ferocity. Naruto was able to avoid the beast by leaping into the air just in time after he heard which way it was coming. Regretfully, the water dragon saw Naruto and contorted its liquid body. With its mouth wide open and poised to eat the Iwa Nin, the beast roared again and made its way toward Naruto. Naruto yelled, "Shadow Clone Jutsu," and a clone materialized beside him. In order to assist the original Naruto in escaping the water dragon, the clone grabbed hold of his right arm and threw him to the left. The dragon closed its enormous mouth on the clone and exploded, showering the entire land beneath it with water, showing no interest in the one that escaped. As he watched the dragon burst, Naruto landed atop a tree. When he followed his instincts and leapt, he managed to dodge Hiroku's kunai. "Stand still," he swore, trailing Naruto. Naruto was able to throw his own kunai while continuing to dodge Hiroku's. This went on for a while longer until they were facing one another, standing atop the water that Hiroku had called forth. After waiting for one of them to initiate contact, Naruto let out a growl. He questioned, "Why are you doing this? Who sent you?" His response caused Naruto's right eyebrow to raise. "I am Hiroku, a former shinobi of Kumogakure who was sent to deliver an unsealed Hyuga to my village," he said. "Former?" he inquired, and Hiroku burst out laughing as his chakra enveloped him. "With this power, I don't need my village, I can defeat anyone." Naruto yelled, "You're insane," as the man's chakra output made his body tremble. "It's over, eventually my sensei will be back and you'll die. You've done all of this for nothing. Your village will lose a ninja in vain." "You don't get it," Hiroku uttered while grinning maniacally. "I'm not doing this for anyone anymore. I'm doing this for the hunt." "The hunt?" Naruto inquired, obviously perplexed by what the man had said. He exclaimed, "You two are my prey, my kills," in a frantic tone. "After I kill you, the little Hyuga will be next." "What?" Naruto's fists clenched until his knuckles turned white, and his growl grew louder. Yako begged, "Let me help, my host," and Naruto sneered in his head. She sneered in response to Naruto's statement that, "I can take care of this bastard myself." When she said, "With all due respect, my host, I feel that I should disagree," Naruto snarled and charged at Hiroku. "Stop talking and observe." As he dodged Hiroku's kick and delivered a punch of his own, he shouted in his mind. Naruto stopped and turned to face the man as he sidestepped to the left. Unfortunately, the man caught Naruto by the face because he was too slow to do that. The man's speed caused Naruto's eyes to widen, and Hiroku used all of his strength to push him away. As Naruto was launched through a tree, he exclaimed, "Gah!" before losing momentum and sliding his back against the water, gradually sinking farther into the water. Shaking his head and groaning, he swam for the surface, massaging his back and using his chakra to get back up. "I understand what you're saying, my host," Yako remarked with a hint of irony and laughter. Naruto only heard her words because he was too furious to pay attention. "Why won't you allow me to assist?" Naruto stood up and spat out the blood in his mouth as she asked. Naruto replied in an unfriendly tone, "You are a giant chakra beast with destructive powers and poisonous chakra. Just because I was unable to control your malevolent chakra doesn't mean I want to go on a killing spree. My chakra will significantly improve your reflexes, strength, speed, and proficiency. And the Regia, well, anger is anger. It's not good. It's not awful. It simply is. What counts is what you do with it. It is similar to everything else. It can be used for both construction and destruction. All you need to do is decide." Naruto rephrased, constructive anger, his tone brimming with irony. "I heard one of my former hosts refer to it as passion," she said softly. "Passion has freed slaves and prisoners and overthrown tyrants. Where there was barbarism, passion has brought about justice. Where there was only fear, passion brought about freedom. People have used passion to build something better, stronger, and more beautiful from the ashes of their terrible lives." Naruto was unable to even respond to that. She was telling the truth. Hearing it from her, of all people, was strange, but it was the truth. "What do you recommend?" Naruto inquired, and Yako's laughter could be heard. "I think I remember you practicing your three-tailed form," Naruto said, and his eyes widened. "Are you crazy? I nearly killed everyone around me the last time I attempted it. Han.Ni and Roshi prohibited me from doing it unsupervised," Naruto clarified, and Yako nodded inside her cell. "I recall that," she said. "In any case, I still think you should try it," and Naruto shook his head. Naruto declared authoritatively, "I can't control your evil chakra, so I'm not putting Hinata-chan and everyone else in danger." Even the thought of a dead Hinata in his demonic arms was unsettling to him. "That won't happen," Yako said confidently and definitely. "I promise that she won't suffer any harm as a result of us." She went on, "I'll even guarantee that you will be in control," and Naruto hummed to himself as he considered the circumstances. Naruto noticed Hiroku outside staring at him strangely before he smiled like a predator and charged at him. Naruto inhaled deeply and closed his eyes. Upon opening them once more, he was confronted by the cage of the Kya. The cage's seal is still in place. "Master, time is running out," Yako said, her voice a little worried. Before slamming his hand against the cage, Naruto simply gazed at her while wearing an expressionless mask. "Let's get it done." Hiroku materialized in front of him and thrust a kunai into Naruto's stomach as soon as he had that thought. Naruto's eyes grew wide as his stomach began to ache. He dropped to his knees and spat out more blood. "It's over," Hiroku sneered and said. When Naruto grinned, he scowled, and the laughter that was brewing in his chest made his shoulders shake. When Naruto was surrounded by red chakra, Hiroku sneered and leapt away. Before two lumps developed and spread out on top of his head to form long ears, it encircled him like a shield. On his back, 3 more lumps developed and turned into tails. Grabbing the kunai's handle, Naruto mercilessly tore it from his stomach and tossed it aside. After standing there, his crimson eyes gazed at Hiroku indifferently, but then he fell to his knees, his eyes glimmering with passion. When Hiroku saw this, he quickly reached for his pocket with his right hand. He clutched the talisman, then hesitated and let it drop. This is not the moment. Hiroku barely had time to blink before he realized Naruto had a claw aimed at his head as he bounded off from his location and raced down in a zigzag pattern. He was nicked in the cheek after leaping back. With a shout of, "You brat!" he started hurriedly going through hand signals. He barely got halfway before Naruto landed on top of him once more, slicing him to pieces with his right claw. He was unable to move quickly enough to evade the attack once more, so he lifted both hands and bit his lower lip while Naruto's claw sliced his forearms. In midair, Naruto whirled around and slammed his right foot into Hiroku's abdomen. After sliding backward over 10 feet of water, Hiroku came to a halt. He noticed Naruto inhaling deeply when he looked up. A column rose as Hiroku stomped the water, bracing himself for the worst. He surrounded himself with a sphere of water after making a few quick hand gestures. Naruto released his breath as he did, but this time, he released a massive ball of fire rather than just air. No hand signals. As the ball of fire collided with his shielding sphere of water, he thought. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to prevent the water from opening. The water quickly turned to steam, leaving him exposed. He started to say, "Gotta move before." But Naruto interrupted him by coming up behind him. Hiroku turned and punched Naruto in the face out of reflex. Naruto held his face as he reeled back from the blow. Hiroku was left clutching his right hand after the blow. He was surrounded by an acidic chakra. Fuck it. As his focus returned to his victim, he cursed before taking a hard, vicious kick to the face. With the momentum Naruto's kick had given him, he bounced off the water and into the air, spinning. After dropping back to his knees, Naruto ran after Hiroku. 3 more Narutos, each wearing a demon cloak, materialized at his side without the use of hand signals. "How does it feel?" When Naruto heard Yako ask, he grinned menacingly. "As if I'm unbeatable," he growled in response. "And this rush is incredible." With her tail swishing behind her, Yako grinned malevolently deep within his mindscape. "Do you like it, my host?" Innocently, she asked, and Naruto nodded. As the 4 Narutos waited for Hiroku to descend again, he told her in his mind, "It does." The 4 Narutos jumped into action and started attacking the man from all sides before he had even touched the water's surface. One of them attacked Hiroku by forming a tornado with his right claw. Naruto and his clones attacked him after he was launched into the air once more. From a distance, Hinata marveled at Naruto's performance. 3 tails. Can he manage 3 tails? As Naruto and his clones repeatedly sliced, cut, punched, and kicked the man until each leapt back and allowed the man to fall, she thought, that's incredible. Like a corpse floating on top of the water, he struck it. "Do you want to pick up a new skill?" Naruto hummed as Yako asked. "Depends," he replied, and Yako started to elaborate. Each of the clones' lips smirked as she did so. "Let's get it done." Naruto felt heat radiating from his throat and stomach as he combined his fire chakra with the Kya, Bai's. The 4 Narutos felt the power building inside them as he tipped his head back and puffed out his chest. "Not yet," she remarked, keeping an eye on every Naruto attack. "I feel like I'm going to explode," Naruto pondered. Then he heard Hiroku start to get up and groan. Yako held off for a few more seconds. Now, each Naruto leaned forward without hesitation and spit out a ball of fire at Hiroku, who glanced up at the last moment. However, because of the Kya, Bai's chakra, which increased its power and explosiveness, it was not your typical fireball. A column of spiraling fire rose into the air as a result of the collision between the fireballs. Naruto flew back after the shockwave upset the clones, then he righted himself and began to breathe heavily. He was exhausted by that. Naruto asked no one in particular, "Did I win?" A voice behind him replied, "Not quite," but before he could turn, he felt a sharp metal pierce his skin and pierce his back deeply. "Gotcha," Hiroku exclaimed, laughing hysterically. Naruto leapt forward and landed far from him. Naruto muttered a curse as he felt the Kya, Bai's power wane. He fell to one knee as his strength began to wane. "What's happening?" Impatiently, Naruto asked her. She calmly told him, "This wound is fatal. I need as much chakra as I can get to heal it." Before Naruto felt her power entirely ebbing from him, she concluded, "I wouldn't want you to die so young, my host." "Shit!" he exclaimed, removing the kunai from his back. "It's time, boy!" exclaimed Hiroku, who was running toward him with a second kunai in his right hand. Naruto stood for a moment, then fell to his knees after feeling dizzy. "I won't die here," he cried. Naruto hung his head forward and closed his eyes. Hiroku's hand tensed, ready to deliver the final blow, and he was only 10 feet away from his victim. Hiroku stopped as Hinata leapt from her hiding place and charged at him, saying, 8 trigrams 30. 2 palms. She approached him, pointing with her left index and middle fingers, and he grinned. Even Hiroku was struggling to avoid them all because of how quick and precise her hands were. As he leapt away from Hinata, he exclaimed, "What the hell?" The girl simply grinned and assumed her fighting stance. When she assertively stated, "Last time we fought, I was tired and weak. Even with my injury, I'm still fast enough to hit you with my attack," the man scoffed angrily. Though he was blind to it, Hinata was in a panic. She couldn't use one hand to shut down his chakra system entirely. It was conceivable, but he probably won't wait for her to get used to it. He yelled, "You're going to lose," as he dashed toward Hinata, who waited calmly. With his right foot outstretched, he leapt into the air and spun around. Hiroku stretched his left leg to prevent Hinata from exploiting his back being turned, and Hinata ducked and leapt back. Hinata spied a gap and hurried in, pressing a chakra powered palm against his chest. After turning, he was able to kick her right arm. To prevent herself from yelling in agony, she bit her bottom lip. Hinata prodded both of his legs twice, ignoring the pain. but Hiroku caught her by the throat and pushed her away as he fell. He stood back up, growling as his legs felt like gelatin. Hinata groaned as she used a nearby tree to support herself because the pain was burning through her arm. Despite Hiroku's limp, she saw that he continued to approach Naruto, who was still healing from his most recent wound. "Lava style," muttered a voice. Blobs of quicklime were hurled in Hiroku's direction with the cry, "Quicklime congealing jutsu." But he failed to react quickly enough. His left leg, both feet, and shoulders were struck. He screamed in pain as the hot, burned lime melted into his skin. The water caused the quicklime to solidify quickly, resembling cement. When he looked up, Naruto was running toward him with his right hand behind him. "Hey asshole!" he exclaimed. Naruto didn't care that blood was spilling into the water with each step he took. Naruto threw his right fist forward and yelled, "This is for Hinata. Chan. Explosion style. Land. Mine fist." Hiroku's face was struck by his fist, which caused an explosion that shook the neighborhood. Making a mistake, Naruto ricocheted back as a charcoal figure was launched into the air. In a typical situation, the user's object would have been completely destroyed by the jutsu. The right amount of chakra can even negate the recoil and prevent debris from striking the user. But because Naruto used too much chakra in the attack, it exploded, sending both victims hurt and burned flying. Naruto was unconscious even before he hit the ground. As quickly as she could, Hinata ran to him and caught him before he drowned. By them, Kuretsuchi emerged, facing the direction that Hiroku had taken. After examining Naruto, Hinata nodded in response to her question, "You guys okay?" She replied, "He needs to rest for now," and Kuretsuchi gave a nod. Kuretsuchi said, "If he's not dead, nothing can kill him," mainly to herself and not to anyone else. Hinata needed to know, but she was hesitant to ask. She heard Kuretsuchi laugh as she questioned, "What was that technique Naruto used?" "It's an explosion jutsu Deidara. Sensei taught him. He tried to teach Daichi and me but we couldn't pull it off. We didn't have the chakra needed to do it. Naruto did, and he managed to get it down, for the most part." She spun around and gave the unconscious blonde a playful glare. "Deidara. Sensei told him not to use it without his permission but the idiot never listens," she said. Saying, "This isn't over," Hiroku willed himself to stand. Eventually, he needed to stand with the support of the tree next to him. Kuretsuchi turned to face Hinata as he gasped. His face was so severely burned that it was unbelievable he was still alive. His skin started to regenerate, and a light shone in his chest. "What the?" Kuretsuchi stepped back, startled to see that his wounds were gradually getting better. He was almost as good as new again, but his eyes had slits in them, like a cat's. Around him, bubbles of blue chakra formed a tail and 2 ears. Hinata muttered, "This can't be," as she gazed in awe and terror. Hiroku merely said, "Get ready," before darting through the space between them and emerging before Kuretsuchi. She tried to dodge his blow by jumping back, but she was unable to do so completely. He was able to send her away with a sickening thud after his chakra claw struck her left arm. She screamed in agony and would have screamed more, but Hiroku quickly got to her and grabbed her by the throat. When he said, "You're in the way of me and my prey," Kuretsuchi whimpered as his grip tightened. Hinata ran up to him and yelled, "Get away from her." She didn't think much about it, but she was perplexed when he didn't even try to move. To her surprise, her left palm struck his chest as she thrust it forward. He didn't flinch at all. He remarked, "Nice try," as Hinata pulled her hand back, sensing that the chakra around him was beginning to burn it. As they both landed and started to sink to the ground, Hiroku recklessly threw Kuretsuchi at Hinata, knocking her unconscious. Kuretsuchi reappeared with Hinata in her embrace. "Wake up," she yelled, slapping Hinata across the face. With a moan, Hinata narrowed her eyes and opened them gradually. The hit had left them glassy. Hiroku said, "Time to end this," as he approached Kuretsuchi and Hinata slowly. Kuretsuchi said, "This is really a bad time to be out like a light," as Hinata began to regain her senses. Dreamily, "My pouch," she said. "Bamba." Kuretsuchi discovered a round object when he opened Hinata's weapon pouch from beneath the water. When she removed it, she discovered a tiny black sphere. A bright light was released when Kuretsuchi threw the sphere into the air, causing it to explode. Hiroku was briefly blinded, but this was short-lived, but it only had to last long enough for Kuretsuchi and Hinata to get Naruto back and flee. While Hinata struggled to remain conscious, clinging to the branch she rested on with Naruto in her arms, Kuretsuchi took a break from the madman to catch her breath. Kuretsuchi thought out loud, "What now, Deidara? Sensei and Daichi are busy fighting some girl and we have a crazy guy going after us." Hiroku added, "And you're choking to death," as he quickly grabbed Kuretsuchi's neck. Watching her struggle, he pulled her out of the water and gripped her tightly. Kuretsuchi fought against his hold, but the more she resisted, the stronger his hold became. Her movements eventually became sluggish and slow, eventually coming to a complete halt. He threw Kuretsuchi away like an old toy, bored with his current kill, and faced his original prey. His gaze flicked from Hinata to Naruto. "That boy will die by my hands," he said. "His blood will taste sweet." Hinata took a kunai from her pouch and held it defensively, albeit shakily, even though she could hardly make out Hiroku's image. "How pathetic," he said with a laugh, slapping Hinata's hands with the kunai. Over Hinata, Hiroku grinned maniacally. Hinata's defiant attitude did irritate him, but then again, hunting wouldn't be worthwhile if his game wasn't exciting. As he raised his claw to kill them, he said, "Goodbye to your mate." He was unsure of the precise moment that strangely shaped kunai struck his leg, but it didn't matter because he would quickly recover. He didn't anticipate, though, that a flash of yellow would materialize in front of him and kick him in the face hard enough to knock him back. He looked up and growled. He growled, "Who dares come between me and my prey?" but was taken aback to see an elderly version of his victim. Hiroku was unable to identify the face he was seeing for some reason. He understood the idea of being cautious, but he couldn't even recall why he should be afraid of the man in front of him. With another of his tri-bladed kunai in his right hand, Minato snarled, "If you touch them one more time, the next thing you'll see is you death." "Leave," Hiroku said, swishing his chakra tail behind him. As he ran in Minato's direction, he declared, "I can easily destroy the likes of you because I have the power of 10 cages." Before Hiroku could even notice, Minato had dropped his kunai and was pointing it at his neck while resting his other hand on his shoulder. Quick, Hiroku thought, and then it dawned on him that Minato was exuding a strong desire to kill, and he wondered how he had only just realized. He was not going down without a fight, though. As he stood next to the kunai he had dropped earlier, his tail shot up and tried to wrap around Minato, but once again, he was too fast. Hiroku yelled, "Bastard," as he hurried to Minato without seeing that Minato had reversed his right hand. Minato vanished in a flash of yellow just as he was getting over him. Then, without saying a word, Minato drilled a blue ball of spinning chakra into Hiroku's back, forcing him into the water. He broke the ground after being thrown all the way to the bottom. As he waited for his injuries to heal from his newfound strength, Hiroku glared up at the water. He glanced down at his chest, where the talisman lay. Minato used this opportunity to seize Naruto and Hinata, who were only partially conscious, and move them to a safer location. After a brief absence, he returned with a Kuretsuchi who was unconscious. He felt her pulse and let out a sigh of relief. He led the three to a clearing where Naruto and Hinata could rest without worrying about drowning because the water was just shallow enough. He paused, his sky blue eyes stained with tears as he continued to gaze at Naruto. "Myasona." Minato scowled in rage at the idea of that man attacking both his son and his goddaughter. He appeared directly beside Hiroku using his notorious Hireishin technique. Minato caught Hiroku by the shoulder and twirled him around, adding a sense of surprise. Minato managed to completely turn Hiroku to face him, even though they were still submerged. To put it mildly, Hiroku was taken aback, particularly when Minato placed a seal over his head. Minato used his notorious method to exit the water and approach Hinata, who was brandishing one of his tri-bladed kunai, while glaring and kicking him in the stomach. Moments later, a loud and angry roar followed by a distant spark of electricity accompanied by a half-tiger seal. Hinata nodded, still too drunk to focus on what was happening, and said, "I'll be back, Hinata." "Chan." Minato ran frantically to Hiroku, who was gasping for air and twitching erratically from the electricity. Minato asked gravely, "Like it?" At that, Hiroku kept staring at Minato before his eyes widened. "I had my student charge up the seal with his lightning chakra." Hiroku muttered foolishly, "Thea the Yellow Flash," when he at last recalled Minato's nickname. Minato merely grinned. He said, "That's me," while he moved through hand signals. His right hand went into his pouch while his left held a one-handed ram seal. Another seal bearing the word, "seal," was removed by him. Hiroku attempted to cut him with his claws, but Minato quickly slammed it on his back and leapt back. The seal's impact was immediate. It began to absorb the strong, acidic chakra that surrounded Hiroku. Feeling as though the seal was using up all of his energy, Hiroku questioned, "What are you doing to me?" "Taking away that demonic chakra from your system." "You're welcome," said Minato. The seal dropped off his back and floated harmlessly on top of the water when the chakra was completely depleted. As Hiroku collapsed to his knees, defeated and weakened, the water surrounding the area also started to recede. He yelled, "I'm not done, not yet." as he charged at Minato with the goal of murder. He was aware that his body was hurting and shutting down on him, but he chose to ignore it. At the very least, he wanted to bring someone down with him. He abruptly stopped and turned to face his body. "Gah!" he exclaimed in agony, feeling as though his entire body was on fire. 8 trigrams, said a voice as serene as a soft wind. 120. 8 palms. Hiroku couldn't even keep up with the speed at which a dark blue blur appeared and started to shut down all of his chakra points. Hiroku fell to his knees, his body too numb to feel anything, as the attack went on until the final chakra points were closed. His eyes met the Ga patriarchs as he gazed up in a daze. They were just as frigid as any Arctic glacier. Ga, he pondered. Heishi reared his right palm back mercilessly and then thrust it forward to the man's chest, directly over his heart. The man's heart stopped beating when the blow struck him, and he fell into the shadows. When Hiroku fell to the ground, still, Heishi let out a sigh and relaxed. He approached Minato's hiding place for the 2 teenagers. He noticed that Minato was grinning at him, so he returned the smile. He then turned his focus to Hinata, who eventually passed out and fell asleep next to Naruto. Heishi and Minato exchanged a weary smile as their eyes met again. He said, "We found them," and Heishi gave a satisfied nod. He examined Naruto and was shocked to discover that, aside from the shorter blonde hair and the whisker lines on his cheeks, he resembled his father quite a bit. Minato and Heishi heard Obito say, "Hey, that cat girl was hot, you gotta admit," as he, Kakashi, and 2 other people approached them. Deidara said, "TCH, I won't," as he walked with the assistance of his pupil. After Daichi said, "Shoot, I will," his sensei gave him a hard blow to the top of his head. Kakashi and Obito made fun of him until they were in front of their superiors. Deidara said, "Konoha's yellow flash," with a blank look on Minato's face. He smiled, which surprised me. "Nice to meet you." At this, everyone blinked, and Minato returned the smile. "Same here." Then Deidara looked at Obito and Kakashi. Kakashi gave a passive nod, and Obito laughed and put his hands behind his head. "Thanks again for the help. That girl was a handful," he said. When Obito joked, she was nothing. In fact, I'm pretty sure even Kakashi could have taken her on all by himself. He was stabbed in the ribs. He shouted, "Ah, you jerk," to Kakashi, who merely grinned beneath his mask. With a laugh, Minato lifted his son and laid him on his shoulders. Kakashi and Obito gaped at him at this point. Obito and Kakashi simultaneously asked, "Is that a?" Minato nodded and smiled broadly. "He looks like you." Deidara's statement startled everyone once more. Minato glared gently at Deidara. Deidara shook his head and asked, "How do you know?" Daichi merely observed, closely examining his sensei. "I always knew, it wasn't hard to figure out really," he replied. "I got a look at him around the time Lord Tsuchikage announced his adoption of him." Minato felt his body coil up and his jaw tighten, but he relaxed after realizing what he was doing. Deidara concluded by saying, "He looked like you as a baby, and when I heard of Konoha's loss, I was able to put the pieces together." Daichi started, "So Naruto? And Deidara nodded. "Was born in Konoha, yes. In fact, he's the son of their Kage." Heishi said, "Given that we're Konoha nin, I think you'd be more hostile against us," and Deidara shook his head. Daichi hummed to himself as Deidara remarked, "To be honest, I don't really follow this hate Konoha custom we have back home. It's just sad really." Minato said, "Thank you," surprising Deidara this time, "for keeping an eye on my son." Deidara grinned. He answered, "It wasn't just me, but you're welcome." All 4 of the Konoha nins had to smile when the statement was made. "You know, you have an interesting kid there. He learns jutsus just as fast as he eats ramen." Deidara continued, "But he manages to drive you crazy all the same," and Minato gave him a quick glance before holding out his right hand. After giving it a long look, Deidara shook it. When Minato said, "We should be going," everyone nodded. When Minato said, "I'll take these 2 to Konoha's hospital. I'll come back for you guys once they're checked in," his team nodded. Minato put his daughter on his free shoulder after Heishi gave her to him. He was gone in an instant. Deidara sighed after gazing at the area where they had once been. Kushina let out an exasperated sigh. She detested paperwork. When Minato returned, she was tempted to let him handle all the paperwork, but she reasoned that since he was bringing Hinata back, this was the least she could do. She wanted to burn each paper separately and watch them turn to gorgeous black ash, but it was hell to get through this. A burn for a burn nevertheless, she was eager for Minato to return. He would be in for the greatest surprise of his life when he did. She was aware that when she first discovered that. The rest of the stack of papers flew into the air in a flash of yellow. After blinking, Kushina snarled and got to his feet. She drew her katana from beneath her Hokage robes and screamed, "What the hell?" Before she could open it, she noticed that Minato was facing away from her. Minato-kun, what's wrong? She smiled and gasped as he turned. She ran to him and exclaimed, "You found her," but stopped when she saw the other teenager in his hands. She studied his hair and face. The marks of whiskers. Minato. K.kun. She stammered in surprise, seeing the bright smile she always loved on his face accompanied by tears. It was the happiest, most carefree smile she had seen since Naruto's birth. With each word, his smile widened. "This is Naruto, our son," he said. Kushina approached him slowly, trembling. She touched his whiskered cheeks lightly, tears welling up in her eyes. As if he would vanish once more, she seized him and gave him a tight hug. She pressed her forehead against his and exclaimed, "My boy." She felt so happy and loved that she thought her heart would burst. Minato was still alive, and her son was back in her arms. Kushina could not have asked for more. She sobbed for a very long time without realizing when Minato had gone. Upon raising her head, she noticed Hinata seated in a chair, gazing at her with a drowsy smile and a few tears of her own. When Kushina said, "Come here," Hinata stumbled to her feet and knelt before her. Kushina smiled proudly and with immense joy as she showed her Naruto. She exclaimed, "This is my son," and Hinata gave her a languid nod. When Hinata whispered, "If found him a couple of days ago," Kushina looked at her incredulously. "I was going to try to bring him back but Lord Hokage beat me to it," Hinata said, wiping away her tears. Without hesitation, Kushina threw her arm around Hinata and gave her a strong hug. She said, "I love you, Hinata-chan," and Hinata gave her a hug in return. After saying, "I love you, too, mother," she began to lose consciousness. We need to go. Kushina finally noticed her injuries as he looked at her. She noticed Naruto's condition was worse. She yelled, "Cat," and an Anbu wearing a cat mask materialized. Cat nodded, assisted Hinata in standing up, and then vanished. "Get her to the hospital. I'll be there with my son," she said. Before heading to the hospital using the body flicker technique, Kushina stood and took one last look at her son. Daichi turned to Deidara after Minato had finished bringing the remaining members of his team home. Daichi asked bluntly, "You're just going to let them take Naruto?" And Deidara nodded. "Would you stop a father from reuniting with his son?" Daichi shook his head and frowned after it. "Still, you know he hates him, right?" Deidara gave another nod. Daichi bit his bottom lip as he considered what he had said. But that's something Naruto's going to have to get over. You only have one father. Without saying another word, he accepted it. He concluded, "Let's get Kuretsuchi and head for a nearby town," and Daichi gave him a nod. Naruto sat up and moaned, "Geez, what hit me?" before he squirmed and clutched his stomach. His entire body ached, in fact. He opened his eyes and surveyed his surroundings. A hospital. What the hell? He noticed Hinata sleeping on the bed next to him. He stared at her, feeling his lips curl upward. She's gorgeous even when she's sleeping. He turned away, blushing as he saw her chest rise and fall with her breathing. He looked out the window to see the trees rustling in the wind and the sun shining. Additionally, people were passing by, and even a shinobi ran past over the rooftops. His fist clenched as soon as he saw the forehead protector. Konoha shinobi, he thought, growling. His eyes widened as he heard his room's door slide open and turned to see who it was. "You," Naruto exclaimed, gasping as Minato entered and grinned wearily. Several times, instincts told Naruto to get out of bed and thrust a kunai right through Minato's heart. And, just for fun, maybe once or twice in the face. Nevertheless, as Minato moved slowly to his bedside, Naruto remained where he was and simply gazed at him. When Naruto sat down next to the older blonde, his icy azure eyes never wavered. With the exception of Hinata's heart monitor and the occasional foot scuffle and whisper from the hallway, the two simply stared at one another without saying anything. Naruto simply did not want to offend Minato in any way. He wasn't stupid, but he couldn't stand Konoha's yellow flash either. The man could kill Naruto before he could breathe again by using his renowned Hiraishin if he so desired. If he wanted to make it back to you alive, he had to be careful around this man. Minato, on the other hand, was simply unable to speak. What he would say if he ever saw his son again had always been on his mind. Despite hours and hours of practice, neither the verbal nor mental formation of any of the words was possible. He simply absorbed his son's image, making sure to commit each line, each scratch, and every detail in between to memory. To be honest, even after being cleaned up and having all the bandages taken off, Naruto still looked terrible. Bandages don't exactly convey excellent health, but whatever. What do you want? Naruto's voice was slow and stretched, like smoke from a smoker's lips, cold and emotionless. Minato realized right away that Naruto was being cautious and cunning with him. Minato couldn't deny that it hurt, but it made sense. Any child would likely do that if they were raised in the same village where Minato had ruled and harbored resentment toward him. The fact that it had to be his child was just awful. Minato was careful with his words. I wanted to check up on you, that's all, as if any mistake would trigger the dynamite that was Naruto. He had undoubtedly inherited more from Kushina than just the Kyuubi. Coldly and harshly, Naruto questioned, do you plan to finish the job that asshole started back in the Land of Moon? Although Minato didn't show it, he was internally boiling. Minato's desire for his blood to be spilled was satisfied by the fact that the aforementioned jerk was already dead. With a calm smile, Minato said, I'm here to make sure you are all right, to Naruto. Naruto gave the gesture a suspicious look in return, refusing to reciprocate the smile. Naruto said, I know we're both from enemy villages, you know that, too, as he adjusted his posture to feel more at ease. Don't get me wrong, I love that the attention of a cage is on me, but don't be offended if I'm a little more than suspicious when the cage happens to be from the village that has shamed my own. Of course, Minato nodded in a prompt response. The statement, I'd probably be the same way, wasn't entirely false. To be honest, it wasn't. Naruto simply gazed at Minato, observing his eyes and body language to determine his intentions. Despite his lack of expertise, Naruto could see that the man was able to keep tension and relaxation in check. Whatever was making the man nervous, he handled it quite well. Minato asked earnestly, how are you feeling? And Naruto turned to face the window. If they were in Konohagakure no Sato, he could not deny its beauty no matter how hard he tried. His succinct response, fine, was too brief for Minato's preferences. Nevertheless, Minato couldn't help but observe that Naruto was always in view of the window. Naruto snapped out of staring at the window to glare at Minato, asking, enjoying the view? Said blonde smiled sincerely at him. Although it was quite contagious, Naruto was able to suppress the urge to smile back. Making friends with the enemy would not be beneficial. Meh, he replied once more. Naruto believed that he would be left alone and eventually make his getaway if he could bore the cage out. He had no intention of staying long. He had to be somewhere to go, somewhere to see people. However, rarely did things go according to plan. That was how the conversation went for the remainder of it, with Naruto responding to Minato's generic questions with single-syllable responses. The man persisted in not letting Naruto alone. Naruto had to speculate as to why he was so attracted to him. What is the matter with him? As he dutifully answered another of Minato's questions, Naruto pondered. He was not really listening. He didn't give a damn. All he wanted to do was go. Eat some ramen, or whatever came first. He never stops talking about himself. Damn it, leave me alone. Besides, you're not really posing any intriguing queries. How's Iwa? Naruto asked, blinking, looking at Minato, who developed a grudging, even regretful, expression on his face. Nevertheless, Naruto couldn't resist giving him a suspicious glare. Then he asked suspiciously, why do you care? Feeling somewhat triumphant after obtaining multiple syllables from Naruto, Minato grinned. Minato said, that's a good question, leaning back in the chair and looking out the window. I seem to care too much. Naruto muttered, not my problem, shifting his focus to the window as well. As they admired the view outside the window, neither of them spoke. The sun shone as though it would not be there the following day, and there were no clouds in the sky. The smiles on everyone's faces as they passed the window suggested that they were all happy with their lives. Naruto muttered absently, everyone looks so happy, not realizing that two sets of eyes were fixed on his turned head. The joyful laughter of young children as they ran alongside one another, tagging one another and ignoring the adults who passed by while attempting to finish their errands caused Naruto's eyes to soften. Naruto had always dreamed of such a life, a one that was blissful and unaware of the struggles faced by shinobi. Unfortunately, he had experienced such adversity at an early age, and now it appeared pointless to look for such a life. Minato stated, I try my hardest every day to keep it that way, while he was also preoccupied with the young children. They're our future. They must be protected above all. Naruto was a little shocked as he faced the cage. There have been tales of the ruthless cage who killed without mercy and without a conscience, a heart or soul. A demon or monster that emerged from hell's deepest abyss. Upon examining the demon's eyes, Naruto realized it was all propaganda directed at him. A child was a monster, and so was this man. He simply knew when and how to act like a shinobi. Even so, the mere proximity of the man caused a roiling sensation in his stomach. Naruto was at a loss for words. His current vocabulary was limited to confused sounds and grunts. He was the master of clever conversation. Minato started, "Let me ask you something," after Naruto was interrupted without saying anything. "Assuming that I answer your questions," he said. Minato thought about this thoughtfully before grinning. "What do I get in return?" he asked. Minato said, "You can ask me any questions you'd like," and he bowed. "And I promise to answer the question as honestly as I can." When Naruto said, "Any question and I get an honest answer, how'd I know you're not lying to me?" Minato straightened up and then bit his thumb until blood came out. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a scroll, swiping it quickly with his thumb. After that, he rolled it up once more and gave Naruto a soft, underhanded toss. At the scroll, Naruto raised an eyebrow. "The scroll is one of my wife's specialties," Minato said gravely. Naruto looked at him incredulously before he opened the scroll and said, "To put it as simply as possible, the scroll sucks up the chakra of whosever blood the scroll contains." The scroll contained so many intricate symbols and writing that Naruto nearly walked right by it. He never tore his eyes from the scroll's back, even though he laid it face down on his lap. Minato omitted the fact that it could only be activated by either Namikaze or Uzumaki blood, and that doing so would currently only have the opposite effect. Naruto looked at Minato suspiciously and asked, "Why give this to me?" "It's a pretty good gesture of my willingness and honesty, not to mention one hell of an incentive to tell the truth," Minato replied, grinning as she added the final sentence. When he noticed the doubt in Naruto's face, he sighed and reclined in his chair. He went on to say, "If you'd like, you can test it out yourself," and Naruto glanced at the scroll before turning to face him. "How?" Upon searching, Naruto found a whirlpool symbol exactly where he had predicted it would be. "See that small whirlpool symbol at the top? Middle portion of the scroll?" Naruto eyed the symbol again and said, "That's the first connection that will connect you to me and allow you to control how much chakra is sapped from my reserves." Naruto arched an eyebrow at Minato once more and said, "All you have to do is apply a tiny hint of your blood into the whirlpool to close the connection off." Naruto remarked, "Sounds like a trap," and Minato shrugged. "It does seem that way, doesn't it? I promise you it's not, but besides my word, you have nothing to base it off of." "True," Naruto said hesitantly. Minato calmly stated, "So in the end, it's up to you whether or not you close the connection," as though he had been discussing the weather. He was actually extremely anxious, questioning whether Naruto would believe him. He didn't think it was possible. Until Naruto bit his thumb and pressed it against the symbol of the whirlpool. A click. Like sound reverberated in their minds as the two blondes felt a metaphysical lock that bound them together. Naruto glared at Minato, but Minato gave him a supportive gesture in return. "Just concentrate, search for a tangible bond in your head and you'll soon learn what to do." Silently, Naruto closed his eyes and followed Minato's instructions. He felt foolish for even believing Minato after a few minutes of this, but when Minato's name crossed his mind, he saw a red ribbon. He blinked at Minato as he opened his eyes. Minato merely grinned. He closed them again and touched the ribbon, but Naruto remained silent, observing Minato's smile and body language. Power surged through the ribbon as he touched it, making it hum. He felt a strange chakra enter him as he gently pulled at it. With a labored grunt, he pushed the chakra into his abdomen. When he thought his stomach was going to explode, he grunted once more, this time in agony. Minato casually stated, "You have to store the chakra into the scroll," while concentrating on Naruto's face. He nearly leapt out of his chair to stop the ritual when he saw the painful mask, but he forced himself to remain there and let Naruto take care of it alone. He was barely audible, and Naruto pushed the alien chakra through his body and into the scroll that was still in his grasp. It was strange. The sensation he was experiencing at the moment was difficult for him to explain. If one had to put it in words, it would be as though he had both hands on two conductors, with hazardous amounts of electricity moving innocuously from one hand to the other. Naruto paused and opened his eyes at last. Sweat was streaming down the fourth Hokage's forehead, and he could see that he was breathing heavily. Naruto quickly discovered that he was the one panting after hearing someone else do so. Minato smirked and said, "See?" Naruto nodded. Naruto nodded, "So, I'll ask my question first," and Minato hummed to himself after giving himself a little time to catch his breath. The question, "Do you know who your parents are?" triggered old scars in Naruto, but he chose not to reveal them. Naruto replied, "Not really, they were killed before I even got to meet them," before turning back to the scroll. "Or so they tell me." Minato became intrigued. "What do you?" Naruto angrily declared, "It's my turn now," and Minato nodded after blinking. Minato blinked once more and stifled his laughter. Are you responsible for my father's death? He asked. He would destroy any trust he had built with Naruto if he laughed, and he would also likely lose more of his chakra. Naruto appeared extremely serious. With all the sincerity he could muster, Minato responded, "No, I did not." For a moment, Minato believed Naruto was going to take more chakra as he thumbed the scroll while his brow was furrowed in rage. Rather, Naruto sat patiently on the hospital bed with his hands relaxed. "Okay," Minato said, letting go of a breath he was unaware he was holding. Naruto bit his bottom lip in response to Minato's question, "What did you mean by, or so they tell me?" Naruto started to say, "I was told that my parents were killed, in cold blood, by the man that humiliated our home in the last great shinobi war," but he stopped. "However, it didn't make much sense until I asked my sensei more about it," he continued. Naruto looked at Minato strangely and asked, "What exactly did your sensei tell you?" "Right, sorry, go ahead." Minato shook his head, asking, "Are you going to murder me?" Naruto appeared to calm down, to the extent that Minato was offended to learn that his son had believed he was going to murder him. Even though it was understandable, the pain persisted. He repeated, "What exactly did your sensei tell you?" And Naruto turned his head away. He pondered whether or not to tell him. What the devil? It didn't really matter, did it? He stopped and stared at his hands while mentally reliving the entire incident. He said that I was lied to, that you didn't really kill my parents out of cold blood. Then, I was called up to the Tsuchikage's office, he said. Naruto looked up when Minato interrupted his thought, asking, "Naruto?" Naruto cleared his throat and shook his head. Naruto inquired, "How long have I been out for?" Minato responded, 3 days, and was taken aback by Naruto's emotionless reply. Before Naruto could respond, a nurse opened the door and stopped when she noticed that Minato and Naruto were both staring at her. "What happened the day the Tsuchikage called you to his office?" she asked. The attention made her flush. Minato nodded and turned to Naruto, who gave the nurse a suspicious look. "I apologize for interrupting, but I'm here to check up on my patient," Minato said. Disregarding him, the nurse took Hinata's chart and started looking through it. Minato said, "Go ahead," and Naruto gave a nod. He held the scroll tight as he mentally reenacted the incident. They told me the truth," Naruto snarled, feeling his ability to control his rage ebb and flow falter. This memory always did this to him, and he was powerless to stop it. A little alarmed by what they told Naruto, Minato waited. Minato noticed that Naruto's round pupil had changed into a slit, similar to the Kyaubi's, when he opened his eyes. Fortunately, however, his irises remained blue. He crumpled the scroll in his hands and yelled, "They said that you kidnapped my mother and took her away from my dad." His emotions erupted out of control, causing his body to tremble. And he was so angry, so helpless and depressed that he committed suicide. That's what the reports said, but the old man knew better. He knew that you set it up to look like a suicide. Minato calmly remarked, "I already told you I never killed your father," but Naruto shook his head and horizontally swiped his right hand in front of him. "Lies!" Naruto screamed, his hands tightening around the scroll again. Minato muttered a curse as he felt some of his chakra leave him. Minato yelled, "I told you no such lies," as he sensed Naruto draw energy from the Kyaubi's chakra. The demon was undoubtedly applauding Naruto's fury. He said, "Then why would the Tsuchikage take me under his wing and raise me to fight you, to kill you? They showed me a picture of her," and he smiled sadly. Naruto shouted, "She was so beautiful and kind. Why did you take her from me?" Looking back, he would find his own statement strange and dubious, but the image of his mother kept coming back to him, fueling his rage and erasing any rational thought. For his part, Minato simply gaped in disbelief. "What are they?" he thought frantically. Minato screamed, "I did no such thing," as he got up from his chair, his rage stoking him. The nurse smirked, but the two were too preoccupied shouting at one another to notice it. She suddenly pulled out a kunai and sprinted in Naruto's direction. The nurse ran toward Naruto, who blinked. When he realized that he couldn't stop the nurse even if he were standing, his eyes widened and he gasped. Minato's form vanished in a flash of yellow, and he emerged behind the nurse in the time it took Naruto to inhale. Everything seemed to be going more slowly than usual to him. His chakra was already forming into a constantly spinning ball when he brought his right hand back. The woman spun into the window, broke it, and flew into the next building that faced the window after he quickly jabbed the Rasengan into her back. With wide eyes, Naruto turned to see the nurse affixed to the wall of the building. She started to fall from the dent she left, but she didn't move. 3 Anbu entered the room without a preamble, and a 4th grabbed the nurse before she hit the floor. Minato stopped himself before he revealed that Naruto was his son. "Send her to Ibiki and tell him I want to know why she attacked my..." was his first thought. He concluded, my guest, and the Anbu nodded before vanishing again. With a sigh, Minato turned to face Naruto, who continued to stare at him. Smiling, he said, so, whose turn was it? Although his rage persisted, Minato was able to restrain it before it overwhelmed him. To a lesser degree, Naruto was able to accomplish the same. After gathering his thoughts, Naruto questioned, you didn't kill my dad and kidnapped my mother? Minato gave a headshake. The door exploded off its hinges, flew across the room, and hit the wall with a loud thud before Minato could ask his next question. The voice and question caused Minato's and Naruto's eyes to widen. Where's my baby? Minato had hoped that he would complete his interrogation before Kushina showed up. It wasn't that he didn't love her or anything, but Kushina had a way of making things go horribly wrong at times. As soon as her voice reverberated throughout the hospital, she crossed the threshold and looked around the room. She looked straight into her target's eyes and then materialized at his left side, embracing him and sobbing into his hair. She held his head and muttered unintelligible words into his hair. Minato couldn't help but smile. The sight before him moved his emotions. But Naruto had a different idea. Naruto muttered, I knew it, and then everyone in the room could feel his rage radiating out of him. Kushina took a step back and examined his face. His whiskers thickened and his eyes grew slit and red. His nails grew into sharp claws, and his hair grew wilder. He appeared somewhat intimidating overall. After bouncing off his mother's arms, Naruto yelled, you liar, and headed directly for Minato, who ducked his tackle in a flash of yellow. Naruto looked around the room and was able to catch himself before he hit the chair. The nurse had just crashed through the window, and he saw Minato standing there. He had located a section of the window where he could walk without stepping on any broken glass. Minato yelled, wait, but it didn't help. Already sprinting in his direction, Naruto had his right claw cocked back. Even though his body ached and objected to such behavior, Naruto's rage enabled him to put his pain aside and carry on with his plan to murder the man who had taken his mother. When spiked chains encircled Minato's wrists, ankles, and waist, he was just a few centimeters away from driving his claw into his face. It kept him motionless and dragged him back into the hospital bed. Despite his efforts, the chain remained in place. For him it was too strong. Damn her. From his head, he heard Yako curse. He noticed Kushina making a half tiger hand gesture when he looked up. He looked up at her as his features returned to normal. Kushina was taken aback and saddened by the betrayed expression on his face and eyes. He muttered, why as he persisted in resisting the chain. The question, why mom, startled everyone in the room, including Hinata, who was ostensibly still unconscious. Kushina said, why you know who I am? He felt betrayed by her, but he also recognized her as his mother, so it was a bittersweet moment for her. Naruto remarked, you still look the same, as he felt a few tears escape his eyes. Naruto asked, startling Kushina, why are you helping that monster? You mean Minato-kun? Naruto snarled and intensified his attempts to escape his restraints. He screamed, don't say that, don't you even remember dad? And growled ferociously as he fought the restraints. She said, Minato-kun, help, and touched Naruto's forehead with her free hand. He actually leaned against her touch, as if he had relaxed a little. On the opposite side, Minato covered Kushina's hand with his own. His arms and legs went limp, and his eyes grew dimmer. I still have your picture, Naruto acknowledged, grinning wearily. He said, it's in my back pocket. Before using Minato's genjutsu to put himself to sleep. With regretful smiles, Kushina and Minato gazed at their son. After a while, Kushina said, picture? He responded, apparently, I was first lie didn't work, so they decide to use you as a motivator for his hatred of me, as he approached Naruto's soiled and ruined pants, which were on the nightstand beside his bed. Kushina blinked at the building across the hospital, which had a human-shaped dent and a broken window. Without introducing herself, she asked, what happened? Minato sneered. When he said, someone tried to assassinate Naruto, probably an Iwa.nin. Sent her to I&T department, Kushina snarled. He discovered a folded photo in the back pocket. When he opened it, he was taken aback to see a photo of Kushina grinning and waving the victory sign at the camera. Minato muttered, I took this, as he studied the image. How did they? Kushina approached him and let out a gasp. After absorbing the image, she started to shake after taking it from Minato. Before he could finish, she was out the door and stomping out of the hospital. Kushina, wait. He said. With a sigh, Minato turned to face Naruto. Before the chains vanished in a spectral murmur, as though they had never been there, minutes passed. Without looking at Hinata, Minato inquired, how long were you awake? She reddened and jumped. She replied, since before you entered, and she glanced at her hands as he turned to face her. Minato just grinned, his eyes shining with mischief. Good. Kushina was upset. That was visible to everyone she passed. Not even Itachi dared approach her. Itachi jokingly said, "Hello, Lady Hokage," but Kushina didn't pause in her journey. When she said, "Don't mess with me right now, Itachi blinked. That was novel. Keeping up with her, he asked, "What's wrong?" It didn't take him long to figure out her direction. "I'm going to talk to a rat," she declared, her violet eyes glimmering with mischievous intentness. Itachi simply came to a halt and observed her leaving. When she was in one of her I&T moods, he didn't want to be around her. Kushina explained her mission to everyone in earshot as soon as she arrived at the I&T department. She yelled, "Where is that Iwa punk?" And two Anbu attempted to stop her. The mischievous expression in her eyes changed to icy rage as she glared at each Anbu. "Get out of my way," she said. No average human could survive the many fights and gores they were trained to endure. However, no amount of instruction could prepare them for a Kunoichi mother's rage and resolve. She was able to circumvent all customs and protocol and asked Ibiki a ton of questions. A purple-haired Kunoichi was already questioning the Iwa assassin in the room when the man merely sighed and let her pass. Kushina said, "Move Anko," and Anko allowed him to enter the Iwa.nin without objecting. She walked out of the room to join Ibiki, grinning. It was going to be enjoyable. In an empty room, Kushina gazed down at the woman bound to the chair. She surveyed the space. Kushina said, "Such a cliché copyright room, don't you think?" But the Iwa Kunoichi didn't answer. This infuriated Kushina, who took hold of the woman's collar and forced her to face her. When Kushina asked, "Why did you try to kill my child?" the Kunoichi just stared at her in disbelief. When she remained silent, Kushina snarled and shoved her away. When the killing intent nearly caused the Kunoichi to faint, Kushina released her chakra and let it fill the room. "I'm surprised that you're still awake, but I can't say I'm upset. The next part is never fun when the victim is unconscious. Any sane person would never fully understand the next few minutes because they were so horrific and graphic, and they would be unable to remember the memory at all if they tried to relive it through words." But Anko made a note. Ibiki muttered something about rookies and their lack of subtlety while shaking his head. Kushina had a frown on her lips when she emerged from the interrogation. She said, "Damn it," right when it was getting good, and turned to face Ibiki. "Did you get all of that?" Ibiki asked with a positive shake of his head. She uttered the words, "Inform the Hokage," and walked out of the room. Ibiki said, "What about you, Lady Uzumaki?" And she halted as she was leaving the room. Ibiki sighed as she hurried out of the room, saying, "I need to see someone. Only she can relax me before I do something stupid besides Minato, and he's going to be too busy." When he noticed stars in his apprentice's eyes, he turned to face her and frowned. She recoiled when he reprimanded her. "What are you waiting for?" She scowled as she said, "Go see to it that the message is received," and then she slowly left the room. After giving her a fierce look, Ibiki shook his head once more and summoned Anbu to clear the psychological mess that had once been an assassin. Naruto awoke to the soothing hum of a lovely voice as soft fingers caressed his weary head. He assumed they were still at the hospital because he could smell the smell of medicine and death. When he finally managed to open his eyes, he discovered a red hair on his nose. With a weary smile, he groaned and closed his eyes once more. He laughed when he heard a female voice chant, "My baby," over and over. He muttered, "So this is how it feels to be a son," and he heard a grudging sob. When he opened his eyes once more, he saw that his mother was holding him. She was surprised when he lifted a feeble hand to her cheek. He said, "Don't cry, mother. I'm not mad anymore," and Kushina looked at him in disbelief before grinning and kissing his forehead. Her mouth was gentle against his skin. Though Hinata's lips were very different from his own, they reminded him of hers. He didn't have time to consider it, so he couldn't explain it. She gave Naruto a hug and said, "I love you, Naruto." She sobbed, "My child is back in my arms," and her tears landed on Naruto's face. A few of his own tears welled up in his eyes and started to trickle out. Naruto questioned, "Why do I feel so weak?" And Kushina choked. When Naruto looked down, he saw that his ankles were chained and glowing a pale blue. "I'm sorry, Naruto," she began. "We couldn't risk you running away. Enda and I wanted you to stay with me." "What?" he inquired, feeling a little agitated and upset. He said, "Why mom?" And Kushina turned away. "I didn't want you to leave," a voice that Naruto recognized in particular said. His gaze shifted to the left, where he saw Minato looking at them with unshed tears in his eyes. "You bastard," murmured Naruto. To the surprise of both Minato and Naruto, Kushina reprimanded, "Don't say that to your father." Kushina, Minato said, gently reprimanding her at the same time. Kushina gave him a look. She said, "I know you told me not to tell him, but I can't help it," in a voice that sounded like she had been screaming for hours and through tears. "I want us to be a family again. Let's just stop this fighting. Please," she pleaded. She had never sounded to Minato so simultaneously strong, soft, and vulnerable. It broke his heart because it was kind of new to him. Naruto simply gazed in disbelief at Minato. He couldn't have been his father, could he? Naruto could see a connection with him, but he would not accept it. He attempted to flee and escape his mother's control. It was just too much to bear. All of this information and emotion was about to overwhelm him. No matter how hard he tried, his mother was too strong, and he was too weak. Or perhaps the chakra. Absorbing chains made her appear strong. Who could have known? Naruto uttered the feeble words, "Let me go," while still resisting Kushina's grip. She gave a forceful shake of her head. She barely had time to look up when she heard Minato's kunai hum softly before he threw it, causing the chain to break free from the wall. Naruto suddenly stopped and felt some of his energy return after experiencing the tingling sensation of chakra leaving him. Kushina angrily said, "Minato," but Minato shook his head. Confidently, Minato declared, "I'm not going to force him to stay." Kushina simply stared in awe. Naruto turned to Minato and stood. "You know the truth. The real truth. I am your father, and you are my son. As three, in this room right now, are a family. The only one I have," Minato said. It sounded strange and depressing, but it was true. As he watched Naruto make his way to the window, he said, "I'm not going to force you to stay here and listen to the entire truth, but if you want to hear it, you can come to either one of us, preferably both, and ask." As he opened the window, Naruto turned back to Minato and stopped. He told him, "You can come to the meeting I'm holding in 2 days' time," to Kushina's surprise. She yelled in indignation, "What?" But Minato was ignoring her at the time. After saying, Naruto turned and approached the windowsill. He said, "Where?" And Minato grinned. He replied, "Ask Hinata. Chan, she'll know," and Naruto leapt away. There were no sounds in the hospital room. Before receiving a stern but hesitating slap from his wife, Minato simply gazed out the window from which Naruto had left. As she sobbed into his chest, he turned to face her. Minato asked, "Did you see it?" And Kushina gave a slow nod. Minato said, "He cried just before he left, without mentioning anyone by name." Holding himself up with the tree nearest the sidewalk, Naruto gasped. He was still wearing his hospital gown, but he wrapped it around his waist like a towel because it kept showing his less than modest parts. He really didn't want to flaunt his upper body while strolling through the village, but it was preferable to flaunting everything from his knees to his waist. He fled the hospital for an unknown amount of time and distance. All he needed was some time away from his mother and that man. Surely he couldn't be his father? It was just not possible, was it? And inquire as to where the meeting would be held. How in the world was he going to locate Hinata? Naruto blinked. Naruto-kun. No way am I that lucky, he said, turning to face Hinata, the one who had called him out. What luck? Hinata smiled and said, Naruto-kun, I was just looking for you, but Naruto merely gave her a suspicious look. She was red in the face. Her neck was actually red. Was she okay? Knowing who he was, Hinata scowled as he asked, "What for? Did he send you?" She honestly replied, "I bumped into him but he never told me to come after you," and he gave her a look before nodding. He said, "So, what did you want?" He was disappointed that it turned out colder than he had hoped, but there was no point in dwelling on the past. She said, "Oh, sorry, did I come at a bad time?" And Naruto simply shook his head and stared at her. "There's just a lot on my plate," he said hazily, dismissing the worried expression on her face. "Nothing you should worry about." Hinata pondered whether or not she ought to become involved in his affair. When she claimed to have run into Minato and that he hadn't asked her to pursue him, she hadn't lied. However, she had neglected to mention that Kushina had pushed her to force him to stay and attend the meeting. Hinata said, "I know what happened," but Naruto did not respond, at least not in an external way. "I was wondering if there was some way I could help." Naruto venomously suggested, "You could not get involved," and Hinata bit her bottom lip. "No," she stated definitively. The Jincha, Riki, responded to this. "What?" he inquired, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of excitement and anger. Her words, "You need my help," were defiant. "Naruto, Iya," she paused, averting her gaze. When she felt his hands on her shoulders, she stifled a startled squeak. He was still soft on her right arm, she realized. She still wouldn't look him in the eyes. When she finally said, You know how I feel about you. Hinata plucked up the courage to look up and make eye contact once more. I don't know, I'm not used to admitting my feelings so bluntly, so excuse me if it takes me a while to say it again, she said. After some hesitation, Naruto grunted in grudging defeat, but he was smiling. But you need me, and you know it, now more than ever, he said. He appreciated Hinata's feistiness and strong will, despite her kindness and shyness. Hinata nodded when Naruto asked, "You want to help?" Hinata grinned and took Naruto's hand. "You know any good restaurants in town? Maybe one that serves ramen?" Naruto grinned. She guided him silently to Ichiraku's, which was only 5 minutes away. She presented Naruto to the chef and his daughter, who both recognized him right away but remained silent. They got along well and spoke to him as though they had never heard of him. Unbeknownst to them, Ichiraku's recently acquired a third, notorious client. Tucci, the ramen chef, let out a loud bellow of laughter when Naruto said, 5 chicken, 3 shrimp, and 10 miso ramen, and his daughter Ayame nodded. "Please give me 1 miso," Hinata said, grinning and tilting her head cutely. After giving another nod, Ayame wrote it down and followed her father to the back. Hinata looked at Naruto, who grinned at the thought of having ramen once more. She bit her lip in contemplation as he asked, "So, how long was I out for after my mother put me out?" "A day or so," was her automatic response. She shook her hands in front of her in defense when she noticed him raise a knowing eyebrow in addition to the cunning smile on his lips. I think, I'm not sure." Naruto merely laughed. "Relax, Hinata-chan, I knew you were awake the whole time. Doesn't bother me too much. Just pay for my ramen and we'll be even." Hinata smiled as she nodded. Until the ramen arrived, the two carried on having light conversations. When Hinata finished her ramen, Naruto had already begun eating and was halfway through. And then there was trouble. "Hinata!" was shouted so loudly that both Hinata and Naruto jumped. They barely had time to gather themselves before Hinata was embraced from behind. An adolescent with a feral wolf expression lifted her from her seat and held her in midair. He was extremely wild, as though he had grown up in the woods, but not in a mean way. Naruto gave the teenager a sidelong glance but kept eating. The teenage wolf said, "Hinata, I can't believe you're back," as he let her go. Naruto continued to eat in peace because Hinata didn't appear to be upset with the teenager. "I thought I'd never see you again." It was merely a conversation between friends. Not a huge deal. He had no cause to feel envious. He wasn't going to be an overly protective boy guy. Friend, and he wasn't. Yes, he was thinking, protective guy, friend. Her smile told him, "I'm not leaving, Kiba-kun, so don't worry." Naruto grinned. Like all Hinatas, he was constantly considering other people. "When you were missing, I didn't know what to do, the now identified," Kiba stated. Naruto was intrigued by this and reached for his 10th bowl. "One didn't think my life would be the same without you." Threatening to shatter his chopsticks, Naruto's grip tightened. Naruto said, "No duh," to himself. He snarled at himself for being careless. He was superior. After giving him a strange look, Kiba ignored him once more. He said, "Anyway, what are you doing here?" and Hinata gave him a sheepish smile. "Just having lunch with him," she said, gesturing with her thumb to Naruto, who turned his head and waved lazily while mumbling an unintelligible greeting, primarily due to the ramen protruding from his mouth. Kiba scoffed and turned to face Hinata, who, fortunately, was not fainting from the tension. Naruto kept his guard up, concentrating most of his senses on Kiba, even though he didn't show it. Hinata could tell that Kiba thought Naruto was dangerous. Hinata had no idea who or why. Patting the seat to her left, she took a seat. She asked nicely, "Would you like to join us?" Kiba shook his head after glancing at Naruto calculatingly. He said, "I'd love to but I can't," and Naruto grinned. He muttered, "Too bad," but Kiba disregarded him. He stated, "Kurenai. Sensei is training Shino and me to cooperate with the Uchiha," and although only Naruto noticed, Hinata's eyes widened slightly before they relaxed. He said, "Wanna come watch?" And Hinata gave him a shy smile. She paused, unable to think of quick excuses. "I wish, Buddha," she said. Naruto put his 18th bowl on the table and used his right hand to wipe his mouth. "She needs to show me around," he said. He pointed to Hinata, who flushed at the praise. "I'm new in town, you see, and your cage has graciously allowed a pretty flower," he said. "Such as her, to show me, a lowly fox, around. You know, just to establish stronger bonds between visiting shinobi and their village." Naruto grinned to himself inwardly. He had warned Kiba to keep his distance and that if he did so, he would have to deal with the Hokage and another shinobi village. This was a double no-no. He couldn't be that stupid as not to get that, could he? Upon hearing Kiba say, like someone like Hinata would waste her time on you, and you do reek of fox, Naruto began to perspire. He was up against a fool. He continued by saying, and you look like you just ran away from the hospital, to which Naruto grinned. Naruto retorted, thanks for stating the obvious, and jabbed Kiba in the chest. He went on to say, you smell like a mutt, and Kiba snarled. What did you say? Kiba asked, snatching Naruto by the throat. Naruto clutched Kiba's hand with his right hand almost instinctively, pressing his thumb into Kiba's wrist. Kiba released Naruto in a matter of seconds and began rubbing his wrist. When Naruto said, I don't like to be touched, he smiled. Kiba growled once more. For Naruto, smiling always seemed to irritate people more than it did to offend them. Or perhaps I just have a bothersome smile, he thought. TCH, whatever, he said, pushing Naruto away and turning to Hinata. Hinata nodded and said, I'll see y'all later, okay? Tell Kurenai Sensei that I'll visit her soon, Kiba said, nodding while continuing to sneer at Naruto. Naruto refrained from laughing until he was out of earshot and out of the restaurant. He yelled, well, that was something, and saw that Hinata was not sharing his laughter, not even laughing. He could actually see her frowning. What? She reprimanded, he's my friend, Naruto.kun. This time, Naruto scowled and turned his head away. He may not be diplomatic, but that doesn't change that he does mean a lot to me, he said. Hinata nodded in response to Naruto's question, fine, fine. Now, are you going to show me around or am I going to have to figure it out myself? Naruto remained silent for a few minutes because she still appeared upset. After a while, she felt better and started showing him around with a joyful, sentimental grin. She showed him the Hokage's office, where she lived, where he could get delicious dumplings, and so on. He paused outside a clothes store and went inside. He said, I need to get out of this get-up, aware that she was right behind him and could hear him. Nevertheless, he couldn't help but smirk as her eyes burned his back. Was he being watched by the naive and humble Ga? Well, there's a lot of styles to choose from, a girl behind the counter remarked. Her smooth brown hair and smoky onyx eyes made her attractive. Naruto could tell she wasn't embarrassed to take advantage of her attractive figure by the way she carried herself. She winked and blushed as she said, if you need help, just let me know. After giving her a nod, Naruto turned away. She didn't interest him. Hinata ignored her as well and simply shrugged it off. Just because a girl spoke to Naruto doesn't mean that you should lose your temper. I thought it was normal to feel a little jealous. Naruto then went to the dressing room and put on the black shorts and orange shirt that were closest to him. In an instant, he left and threw the gown in the garbage. He approached the girl behind the counter and stopped. He muttered to himself, crap, my money's in my baga back in the hospital room, and then he went to retrieve the gown. Hinata asked, what's wrong? And Naruto explained his predicament. She said casually, oh, well, I can pay for it, but Naruto shook his head. You shouldn't do that, he advised against. Why not? She questioned. He responded, girls shouldn't buy guys' clothes, or waste money on them, and she squinted slightly. And why not? She asked again, putting her hands on her hips to emphasize it. Once more he shook his head. It's just the principle of the thing, that's all. She said, well, too bad, and used her left hand to take his hand. When she handed the girl a shiny card, he moaned and let her drag him. It had a 16-digit number and her name engraved on it. It was a plain lavender card with an imprinted symbol in the upper right corner that he took to be the symbol of her clan. He said, this is humiliating, and Hinata merely grinned. Good, she said, and they departed the store shortly after the girl had secretly given Naruto a card that contained her address and a time that he could enter her house. When she wasn't looking, he threw the card in the trash. Like the hospital gown in the trash, it was worthless. Naruto muttered, and rubbed his head. Hinata glanced over and noticed that he was blushing uneasily. Well, you bought this for me, so thanks I guess. Hinata grinned. She replied, you're welcome. It's the least I can do, and the tour went on. By that point, the majority of the stores were either closing or just opening because the day had already passed and there was only an hour or so of sunlight left. Since they weren't old enough to drink, they made the decision not to go into the ones that were just opening. Hinata, someone yelled. Not another fan, Naruto clenched his fist. Nevertheless, Naruto was shivered by this man's voice. It was almost alien, calculating and frigid. Naruto didn't like how emotionless and remote it was. When the two turned, they saw a teenager with black hair and, if it were possible, even blacker eyes. Naruto was drawn to the teen's authority and power, despite the fact that he was only an inch taller than him. Naruto didn't like it at all. Hinata said, Sasuke-kun, in a low, distant voice that Naruto nearly missed, nearly. Sasuke's lips twitched at the corners, but Naruto saw them return to their expressionless state. I see, so that Mutt wasn't lying. You truly did return, he said, frowning as he examined her sling-clad arm. Well, Naruto believed he did. What happened? Sounded less like a question and more like a demand. It was an accident, she replied, smiling artificially. Naruto's gaze shifted between Hinata and Sasuke. Naruto nearly felt like exploding something to relieve the awkward silence that surrounded them. He approached Hinata and said, I'm just glad you're okay, without ever recognizing Naruto. This infuriated him. He said, I was worried about you, as he pushed a stray hair out of Hinata's face with his left hand. Naruto could tell that Hinata disliked the touch. He had no intention of witnessing someone touch his girl. Tour guide. Indeed, she was his female tour guide. Naruto would slap his forehead if he had the time, hard. While he gently pushed Sasuke back with his right hand, Naruto questioned, have you ever seen an explosion occur because of one punch? Naruto merely grinned devilishly as Sasuke glared at him. He interpreted his silence as a, no, wanna see? Hinata chastised Naruto, Naruto-kun, but Naruto never ripped his eyes away from the Uchiha. When Sasuke noticed something inside Naruto's eyes, he activated his Sharingan and prepared to use a genjutsu on him to keep him busy. When he turned them off, Sasuke grinned for the first time. He said, I see, and stepped back. Naruto's eyebrows arched. He whispered, the nine-tailed fox, loud enough for Naruto to hear. Naruto squinted his eyes. Naruto said, you must be a Uchiha, and he grinned too. Sasuke said, I hear you bastards are hard to kill, but not impossible, with a slightly diminished smirk. Naruto was surprised by how well he handled the compliment. Sasuke would soon prove him wrong when he vanished and then resurfaced behind Naruto, who was taken aback by his quickness. His left cheek was cut a second later, and blood poured out before the Kyai's chakra sealed it off. Sasuke was standing where he had been a minute earlier when Naruto turned and tried to punch him. Naruto glared at him and snarled. Naruto remarked, you're fast, and Sasuke gave him a smug grin. He taunted, you state the obvious too much, and Naruto wanted to slap Sasuke across the face. Stepping between them, Hinata leveled them with a stern look. Her authoritative words, stop this, made Naruto and Sasuke's desire for her grow stronger. When she assumed control, she was simply so seductive to them. She smiled regretfully at Sasuke. She assured him, I'm sorry, Sasuke-kun, but I'm a little busy at the moment. We'll talk later, and Sasuke approached Hinata without saying anything, kissing her on the cheek. Hinata was an adult girl who could take care of herself, so Naruto snarled once more but did nothing. That was what he told himself, anyway. Other than blushing, Hinata showed no reaction to the kiss. As he turned to leave, Sasuke grinned, believing he had deterred Naruto from pursuing the attractive teenager. She sighed and turned to Naruto after watching him leave. She saw that he didn't fully accept the kiss. He didn't mince words when he asked, is there something going on between you two? He gestured vaguely, if you'd like I could call him back and let you two finish it. Which Hinata partially interpreted as the recent exchange between her and the Uchiha. Oh, whatever the hell that was? Hinata gave a headshake. She replied, I'd rather not, and Naruto gave a nod. The statement, but something did happen, wasn't a query. After giving him a suspicious glance, Hinata nodded. Naruto shook his head as his heart struck the pit of his stomach. At the moment, he really didn't want to deal with Mr. Rainbow's dot and sunshine or anything related to him. He then shifted the topic. It took her a moment to wake up from her reverie when he asked, your cage told me that there'll be a meeting in 2 days. Where will it be? Naruto nodded, I'll show you when the day comes, and they both kept walking in a daze, lost in their own thoughts. Hinata asked directly, will you ever recognize him as your father? Naruto questioned, what makes you think he's my father? Why answer my question with a question? Naruto countered, why not just answer my question first? And Hinata shot him a deadpan expression. He let out a sigh, hoping to steer clear of this discussion. I have a bad past and it's not easy to accept that the person everyone told you to hate could be your father, he replied. Hinata said, I understand, but they both knew it was a lie. At least give him a chance, he's not a bad guy. He's very kind, and caring, and sweet. Hinata turned red and averted her gaze. Sounds like you have a crush on him, she said. When she remained silent, Naruto looked at her with disbelief. Holy Shida. The woman yelled, I was young. He was always there, so heroic and all. There wasn't a girl in the village that didn't have a crush on him at some point, she said. Naruto gave a playful smile. She flushed when he asked, "How old were you, Younga?" "How old? Very Younga. How old? I was so childish back then." "How old? She yelled, 10. And immediately covered her mouth with both hands. Naruto held his sides while he let out a loud laugh. He exclaimed, "My ribs," and Hinata sulked. She complained, "You're so mean to me, Naruto-kun," and Naruto wiped a tear from his left eye that didn't exist. His statement, "I'm sorry but this is so rich," caused Hinata to pout once more. They resumed their stroll after Naruto eventually regained his bearings. "When did your crush stop?" She replied, "The moment I saw Mother scare off other flirtatious women," and Naruto gave her a sympathetic nod. "When was that?" Naruto wanted to laugh again when he said, "The same day I turned 11, but he decided against it because he didn't want to upset his girl tour guide." "Oh no, there it was once more," he said, "How fun," rather than slamming his head against the building next to him or laughing. She blinked while trying to come up with a suitable simile. Soon enough, he became more like a second father figure. Those feelings were as hollow Asa as Kiba's head. Naruto asked, raising his hands in defense when Hinata gave him a slight scowl. "Sorry, too soon, got it." She went on, and Naruto nodded. "He acts like my second father. Sometimes, it even agitates my real father. Though, they're both good friends so it's fine," I said. "Cool," Naruto said, unsure of what to say, so he chose to use a vague term. She paused before him and looked at him kindly. She begged Naruto to give Lord Hokage a chance, and Naruto sighed. "Please, Naruto-kun, don't brush this off as insignificant. I have a bad history with all things Konoha. It won't change overnight," he told her, and Hinata hummed to herself. "It isn't as simple as accepting him." She pleaded, "I don't expect it to, but please try, for me." And Naruto's resolve faltered at her expression. He rubbed the back of his head and let out a defeated sigh. Naruto said, "You're evil," in an attempt to defuse the situation. Hinata grinned appreciatively. With her head resting on his chest, she said, "Thank you." She gave him an embrace in return. Hinata stated, "I think I should go home now," but she made no move to leave him. "It's getting pretty late and you've met enough males that hate you without meeting my brother," Naruto sighed. "Brother?" he asked, having witnessed the dangers of overprotective brothers. Hinata had a brother, which was even more shocking than the fact that she was from the enemy village and was being chased by a group of men like lost puppies. Someone up there really had a sick sense of humor, Naruto thought as he gazed up at the sky. "Naruto-kun?" Naruto asked, blinking as he noticed Hinata was now glancing over his shoulder. When he turned around, he saw another irate, elderly-looking teen approaching them. "God damn it, I'm so unlucky," Hinata joyfully exclaimed, "Big brother," as she ran and gave the older-looking teenager a hug. She embraced him with all her strength and without hesitation. He gave it back in kind, albeit with a little more restraint. When they stepped back, Naruto noticed her brother grinning a smile that was sincere to Kami. When he said, "I see that you are well, Lady Hinata," Hinata pouted. He merely laughed. He corrected, "I'm glad to see that you're okay, little sister," and Hinata gave him another hug. After parting ways, they started discussing their experiences over the previous few weeks. Hinata told Neji, her brother, and Neji, "He saved me. Twice." Between the beginning of the conversation and that bit of information, Naruto had wandered off and was lost in his own little world. Primarily because that's when Neji turned his icy eyes on him. It seemed to Naruto that his soul would freeze over. Putting on his best grin, he approached him. He said, "Hiya," and held out his hand to shake. Neji gave it a strange look before Hinata pressed her good elbow against his ribs. They shook when he took his hand. They both forced a smile as it quickly turned into a strength-based competition. Neji said, "Good grip," and Naruto swallowed. He retorted, "Not bad yourself," and worked twice as hard. Neji kept his composure, but he was on the verge of losing it. Naruto was also not far away. By putting her delicate hand over theirs, Hinata put an end to the macho contest. They both blinked at her, as though she had doused their heads in freezing water. Her smile was fearsome but sincere. She asked, "Are we done?" in a way that seemed more like a demand than a suggestion, but she still expected a response. Before releasing their grip, Naruto and Neji gave each other a final squeeze. "Yeah," they both said at once. They blinked. "Stop it," they both said simultaneously. "No, you stop," Neji said with a smirk this time. "Shut up." Hinata rubbed her temples, realizing that this was growing old very fast. Hinata said, "Grow up, you first," and took Naruto by the shoulder, dragging him away. I'll be home soon, brother. With a loud voice, Neji said, not too late. You know how Lord Heishi worries, and with good reason, and Hinata nodded. I know. Neji smirked and shook his head as he watched them go. Interesting. Hinata leveled Naruto with a chilly gaze and shoved him against a wooden fence in the distance. She said, you're such a troublemaker, and Naruto grinned broadly. He made fun of Hinata by saying, you're such a potty mouth, in an attempt to elicit one of her endearing giggles or laughs. Her response was unsatisfactory. I'm serious. You picked a fight with everyone we ran into today, she said. She added the final sentence under her breath. It almost makes me hesitate to introduce you to the rest of my friends, much less my father, she said. On the defensive, he said, I don't start it. He saw that his words resonated when Hinata hung her head and scowled, her bangs hiding her eyes. Hell, I'd rather not meet them, he said. She moved away from him and started to leave. A few feet ahead of her, Naruto stopped her progress by running after her and pressing his right arm against the wooden fence. He insisted, what did I say? But she wouldn't look at him. They're my friends and family, Naruto-kun. They mean a lot to me, and for you, someone who's also important to me, to say something like that really hurts. But you've seen the way those three acted towards me. They don't accept me. They hate me. I doubt your other friends will be any different. They're all the same here, he said, assuming he heard Hinata give a little gasp, but he noticed that her body trembled. I thought you were nice, different from all the other guys. I can see now that you're no different from every other thug that I've encountered on my missions, she said as she passed him. It was painful. No, hearing Hinata say such things about him was a pain in his heart. Furthermore, it infuriated him, too. He said, so I'm a thug? Is that it? But she didn't stop or even respond. You're just gonna walk away from me? After all we've been through? Nothing has changed. Smirking, Naruto swallowed the pain in his throat. All right, he said, grabbing the front of his shirt and tearing it off. That's how you want to be, he said. He ripped off his shorts and was left in his green boxers, shouting, I should have known better. The old man was right. His voice was much lower than before. I have no friends, I can see that now, he said. His head hung low. He growled as he added, I was a fool to believe someone like you could like someone like me. A fool. When he looked up, Hinata had disappeared around the corner. His right fist quickly struck the fence as his body trembled with frustration. As if it were composed of damp paper towels, it exploded through the fence. After pausing, he withdrew his hand from the fence. When he examined his fist, he noticed minor cuts and splinters, but he didn't care because the Kya-bai would take care of those wounds without hesitation. He muttered pitifully, I'm so stupid, and turned to leave. I'm sorry, Hinata-chan. Sitting with her back to the fence, Hinata shook her head and wept in silence. Naruto had been able to clear his head and recognize his mistakes by going for a rambling walk. By spitting metaphorically on Hinata's friends and family, he had insulted her. He ought to have been more considerate of her emotions. It wasn't her fault that she was unaware of his loneliness as a child and the value of family and friends. Yes, he had Han and Kuretsuchi, but Kuretsuchi had her studies and Han was constantly on a mission. He had himself and no one else. To train under the elderly man, who was also not a grandfather, and play by themselves. Nevertheless, the obstinate side of him was upset that she didn't even make an effort to comprehend his perspective. All she could think about was herself. Another, more sensible side of him was upset with himself for being foolish enough to destroy the only thing that kept him modest. The fact that some of the more desperate women kept giving his body a makeover and that it was getting late didn't help either. As he wondered where in the hell he was, he shivered but maintained his tough exterior. Naruto stopped and turned to see a man in a uniform approach him with two followers wearing the same uniform. You, Naruto said. Naruto moaned as the officer demanded, what the hell do you think you're doing walking around my village in only boxers? I'm really lucky right now. Off the top of his head, Naruto uttered. Yeah, I accidentally locked myself out of my apartment and now I'm going to my friend's house. He grinned to himself at his cunning. However, he was surprised when the officer grabbed his arm. He said, what apartment and what friend? And Naruto swallowed. The Oniya? Shit. I can't recall the location of those. He took a risk when he said, you know, the ones near the shopping district. The officer appeared to agree with the response. When the officer released Naruto, he grinned and said, and my friend that lives down the street here. The man went on, why would you visit him? Does he have a spare key? But Naruto felt more at ease. He could go home free with just one or two more lies. No, but this isn't the first time this happened, so he lets me borrow some clothes and gives me a place to sleep till morning. The officer said, I see, and both of his followers gave a nod. Naruto had the impression that he had just survived a battle with 3 cages. Really, it was an amazing feeling. The officer said, "Let's go," and Naruto turned pale. Naruto stammered, "W. What?" And the officer gave him a strange look. He told Naruto, "Let's go to your friend's house. I want to make sure you get there safely," and they started on their way in the direction Naruto had indicated. They walked in silence after Naruto cursed his luck again. As soon as things began to look familiar, he thanked whatever divine being was truly looking out for him. Because it was night, he didn't recognize it right away, but he was certain that he had been there before. He was only 10 feet away from the enormous house when it finally hit him. It's more like a mansion. One of the officer's aides questioned doubtfully, "Are you sure this is where your friend lives?" Naruto stopped and noticed that there were no other houses along the road. They would most likely put him in jail or something if he refused. He would have to find another place for his friend to live if he told them he had become confused because they would think he was foolish. Both of which were bad ideas. He would simply need to wing it until he saw the ideal moment to flee. Naruto said, "Yeah," and then raised his gaze to the sky. He muttered, "You can stop this," and the three officers gave him a strange look. He merely grinned. Two guards met them at the gate as they approached it. The lead officer, who was most likely the Uchiha, sneered at the man's gloomy question, "What business do you have here, Uchiha?" Naruto was behind the Uchiha officer, but he could hear the smirk in the man's voice as he said, "This punk claims that he comes here every so often whenever he gets locked out of his apartment." After glancing at Naruto, the guard shook his head. In his own words, "Never seen him before in my life." The guard gave Naruto a look that seemed to indicate he had seen a ghost, but he dismissed it. The second guard followed suit, looking shocked, then composed himself and shook his head silently in agreement. "Have you?" he asked. "I see," the officer said, turning to look at Naruto. Naruto was finally able to see every feature of the officer thanks to a tiny light near the guard's posts. The two lackeys appeared distantly related to the jerk Uchiha from earlier and could have been brothers or at least close cousins. What was his name? Well, it didn't matter, but Naruto was surprised to see how much the lead officer resembled the previously mentioned jerk Uchiha. Naruto exclaimed, "No wait," as the officers appeared to be ready to take him into custody. "Halt!" The Uchiha officers froze in place, turning to see a figure approaching from the mansion. The someone caused Naruto's eyes to widen. The someone smirked and said, "I know him." Naruto said, "Let him in," feeling both relieved and appalled. Nevertheless, he approached his savior without displaying it. Naruto obeyed his orders to follow me, albeit grudgingly. The two entered the mansion after passing the guards. Once inside, Naruto's savior stayed silent as he proceeded up the nearby stairs and into his house. "Wait, take off your shoes before you enter. Make sure you stay close to me or you'll get lost." Embarrassed, Naruto glanced down at his feet. "I'm not wearing any shoes." His savior hesitated, then ascended the stairs. "I'm sorry, I seem to have mistaken your black feet for shoes. Please wipe them on the rag before following me." With a moan, Naruto wiped his feet and hurried up the stairs. No running. Naruto laughed to himself as he caught up to his savior and silently followed him. "No running, blah blah," he said. They passed numerous rooms, took numerous detours, and came across numerous framed photos and artifacts that appeared more costly than the mansion itself. At last, they made their way to a room on the left, and Naruto turned to face his savior as the door closed. "I know I owe you a thanks, but Naruto was unable to finish because he coughed up blood after a chakra. Powered palm was sent to his stomach. First to his knees, then to his side, he fell. He gasped for air and then glared up at his attacker, savior. The statement, "That is for Hinata," was simultaneously icy, irate, and amused. After glaring into Neji's silver eyes, Naruto got to his feet, albeit unsteadily and slowly. Neji arched an eyebrow and said, "So I'm guessing you heard what happened back there, huh?" "I'll take that as a yes." "Yes, I was there. And now, you're going to go find her and apologize to her," Neji replied. Naruto sneered. "Says who?" As promised, Neji started looking through his closet for some clothing. "I just saved you from spending a not.so lonely night in prison and I'm about to loan you clothes to wear so you won't approach my little sister so indignantly," he said. He threw white shorts and a brown shirt to Naruto. Both were wearable by Naruto's standards, but rather filthy by Neji's. Neji gave him a look and shrugged his shoulders as Naruto hurriedly put them on. "It will do." "Wait, whoa. I don't know who you think you are, but..." Neji struck Naruto in the stomach once more, causing him to collapse to the ground. Neji forced Naruto to look up at him by grabbing him by the hair. "I am the one who saved your ass from getting sodomized by Lonely X. Shinobi. and you'll repay me by undoing the harm you've inflicted on my dear sister. Should you fail, I'll guarantee that you'll never have to worry about problems that only the living bother to worry about. Got it? Neji replied with a raspy voice. Naruto quickly nodded after understanding the message. Neji grinned. She's at the library. Finally, Naruto located the freaking library Neji had mentioned, though he had no idea how he had done it. It's not too far to walk to, but it's not close enough to see from the mansion, the silver-eyed bastard said. A bastard. Naruto sighed, anyway, and approached the library's doors to take a look. The doors had the appearance of being on the front door of a giant. He was skeptical that the door was open after glancing down at the knob, so he looked up and saw windows of 4 of them, to be precise. Additionally, one was unintentionally slightly open. Even though it was difficult to see, Naruto was able to spot the opening, so he used his chakra-powered feet to climb up the wall and carefully open the window. It protested against Naruto's hand by squeaking as it moved. Naruto had hoped to ambush Hinata, but it was too loud. He found the mission Neji gave him to be a little enjoyable, but if he attempted to open the window, it would reveal his arrival. He discovered that all of the windows were closed as he strolled around the buildings. With the exception of the tiniest window at ground level. Naruto gazed at it, his face deadpan. When he opened it, it wasn't squeaky and was unlocked. But he didn't think he could get through it. He wasn't exactly 6 anymore, but he wasn't the world's fattest man either. With a sigh, he pushed in his hands, then his head, and finally his torso. Before the window slid down its frame and onto Naruto's lower back, everything was going perfectly. He bit his inner cheek after letting out a painful gasp. He tried to push his body in, but was unsuccessful, and swallowed the pain. When he tried to push it out again, the same thing happened. He swore to himself until his face turned blue. Then a sting of light hit his eyes as it fell upon him. He moaned as he used his hands to block it out. As Naruto feigned being invisible, or at least Araka, his body froze, motionless. Naruto? Naruto? He was so committed to not being there that he didn't even breathe. After a few more seconds, Naruto inhaled and hung his upper body in surrender after Hinata said, "I can see you, you know?" Hinata helped Naruto out of his situation and into a nearby chair by the tables. "You know, remaining still doesn't make you invisible," she said. With his elbow resting on the table and his chin resting on his right palm, Naruto simply complained. Naruto's eyes widened as he turned to face Hinata. "And the entrance doors weren't locked," he said. She simply waved a key ring with one key while grinning knowingly. Grumpily, he muttered, "Damn doors," so, she said, allowing him to calm. She questioned, "What are you doing here?" "I'm here because He paused, recalling what Neji had said to him prior to his departure. "Don't tell her I sent you or so help Maya." He allowed the threat to linger, but Naruto was unaffected. Naruto grudgingly uttered, "I came here looking for you, to apologize." His words surprised Hinata, who flushed. "What?" Saying, "You heard me." He turned his head away. He inhaled deeply. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be mean." Hinata simply gazed at him before turning to face her hands. After the initial shock subsided, she grinned. "I know this must not be easy for you. TCH. She added, "I'm sorry too." Naruto raised his eyebrows as he gazed at her. Her admission made Naruto look at her before he sighed. "I didn't mean to walk off like that. My friends mean the world to me, and for you to brush them off as if they were nothing made me feel sad," she said. As he reached for her good hand, he said, "You have no reason to be sorry, I'm the idiot here." He used his thumb to massage the back of her hand. "I should have known how important your friends are to you, but I decided to ignore that and call you selfish. I'm sorry." She said, "I don't remember you calling me selfish," and he started to perspire. After saying, "Wella," he paused and met her eyes. His eyes darted to the left and he flushed. He said, "Do you forgive me or what?" And Hinata laughed. "I do," Naruto said with a grin. He said, "I'm glad," and Hinata got to her feet. She said, "Well, I'm going home," and proceeded to the front doors. She stopped to glance back at Naruto, who was also rising. "Mind walking me home? I bet you know how to get there now." Naruto started to perspire. What makes you say that?" She said, "Because of my tour, remember?" And Naruto gave her a sheepish smile. He ran up to her and exclaimed, Right," before they both made their way to Hinata's house. She said, "Neji is a bully, isn't he?" And Naruto unconsciously nodded. "You know he really wouldn't kill you, right?" His words, "I know, Buddha," were interrupted by a realization. Hinata suppressed her laughter. Hinata exclaimed, "Hey," as Naruto finally understood. "You knew the whole time? Did you set this whole thing up?" When she said, "No, but only he knows that I come to the library when I feel sad," Naruto put his hands in his pockets. She said, or, he used to be the only one, and smiled warmly at him. That sounds logical, admitted Naruto, and because those are Neji's training clothes. Naruto jokingly said, and there it is. I knew there was a simple explanation for it. All is well in the world again, as Hinata's good arm elbowed him in the ribs. Naruto could tell she was not angry because of the smirk on her lips. In return, Naruto smiled back, so why do you come to the library? Naruto nodded and they walked on until Naruto could see the mansion. The library has tons of books on stories that my mother used to read to me. It helps me relax when I read a story or two, Naruto said. Did you really know he threatened me or did you guess? She replied, I know my brother, and then paused. Naruto halted alongside her. She kissed him before he could speak. On the cheek. She said, good night, and proceeded to the entrance, where she nodded and smiled joyfully at the guards before going inside her house. She barely touched the doorknob before Neji opened the door. Before shutting the door, he glanced in Naruto's direction and grinned knowingly. With a shudder, Naruto left in an arbitrary direction. I guess I could always go back and ask if they got an extra room I can sleep in, Naruto said as he noticed the beginning of dark clouds. Looks like that's a no, as straight as a no, as you can get from the big guys upstairs. Naruto jumped and turned to see Kushina grinning at him. You can come home, he said. He glared after covering his heart with his hand. Kushina laughed and said, you should wear a bell, before approaching him and giving him a hug. She said, I love you, Naruto-chan, and Naruto reddened. He simply gave the hug back because he was at a loss for words. Let's go, it's getting late and only freaks and weirdos come out at this time. As she finished speaking, Kakashi and Obito crossed the street and began to walk. Obito told Kakashi, who was limping, you totally should ask Anko out. They both slurred their words and had flushes on their faces. Shut up. You know what she does to guys who like her, he yelled. As they continued to argue about the same topic, Naruto and Kushina shifted the topic to the less than ideal Icha series. It was not favorable to Kushina, at least. Later, when there would be fewer witnesses, she would deal with those too. Kushina said, I told you, and Naruto let out a sigh. He remarked, Konoha is a strange place, and allowed his mother to lead him past the Hokage's office and the shopping area. They came to a halt in front of a huge house after a few minutes. It's just the right size, not too big to qualify as a mansion, but not too small to qualify as a typical home. Naruto said, niece, and Kushina grinned and nodded. Naruto saw numerous personal belongings, including paintings and pictures, hung on the wall as they entered. Naruto only paid attention to his mother, ignoring the ones with Minato. Kushina said, I'll show you to the guest room, and Naruto gave a nod. He trailed her into the hallway and out of the living room. There were 4 doors in total. One across from the living room, 2 on the left, and 1 on the right. The only one on the right was opened by Kushina. When Naruto entered, he discovered a queen-sized bed, a closet, a TV, and a nightstand. He didn't need to turn on the light because he could see everything in the room thanks to the moonlight streaming in from the window. Although it wasn't disorganized, Naruto could occasionally tell that it was occupied. Kushina chose not to inform him that whenever she became angry with him, Minato would sleep in this room. Kushina gently informed him, the bathroom is at the door directly across from this room, before indicating the door across from the living room. Her finger was followed by Naruto. That leaves the 2nd floor where my room is. Usually, Minato-kun comes home late, so if you hear the door open and someone walking by your room, it's likely to be him. After giving a blank nod, Naruto moved to the bed to sit. Kushina made the decision not to sit next to him and hold him while running her hands through his hair. Her behavior would only further perplex him, and he was already conflicted. She said, good night Naruto-chan, and despite blushing, Naruto managed to mumble the word, night. Before leaving the room and shutting the door behind her, she grinned. Naruto heard her ascend a set of stairs and open a door. He could just make out her footsteps as she moved about, doing various tasks before probably dozing off on the bed. Naruto remained motionless and quiet on the bed, his thoughts racing 1,000 miles per hour. After that, he got up and looked around the room, discovering everything he had anticipated finding in the guest bedroom, with one exception, though. Later that evening, Naruto heard the front door open and close, just as Kushina had described. He glanced at the wall. Mounted clock. He noticed that it was 2 in the morning because of the moonlight. He stopped and turned when he heard footsteps outside his room. After jumping back onto his bed and pretending to be asleep, Naruto silently thanked whichever god was keeping watch over him for providing him with a bed that didn't creak. Minato looked inside as the door opened. He was shocked to see Naruto and was certain he sensed a chakra. Signature in the space. After a long moment of staring at Naruto's sleeping form, he shook his head and shut the door. Hearing Minato ascend the stairs and head straight to his room, Naruto opened one eye. With his heart hammering hard against his chest, Naruto sat there. This is it. This might be my opportunity. As he sat up, he thought. His lips formed a vengeful smile. I must simply wait. He heard snoring coming from the room above his, so he didn't have to wait long. As he opened the door and entered the hallway, he grinned. When he opened the door, he was relieved that neither the floor nor the door squeaked. Kushina told him that the door would lead to their room, so he crept down the hall and opened it. He made his way up them as quietly as possible, reaching the second floor. A second hallway with 3 doors greeted him. He could see inside because the left door was open. The restroom was the location. The doors on the left and in front of him were not closed, but they were also not open enough to let him see what was behind them. He could hear the snoring coming from the door on the right, so he didn't need them open anyhow. He approached the door and pushed it open with gentle pressure. Naruto froze in his place as it squeaked just once. He would be protected by the darkness, but if Kushina or Minato woke up and switched on the light, it wouldn't help him. Naruto assumed he hadn't been caught because the snoring persisted and he didn't hear any noise coming from the room. The door did not object when he pushed it again. When Naruto entered, he noticed that the room was just as plain as the guest bedroom. A closet was to the right, a king-sized bed was across from it, and a TV was perched atop a dresser. The room was dark because the window was far to the left and the shades were drawn. Naruto managed to avoid tripping over the abandoned clothing and shoes on the floor because of the gifts he was given for being the notorious Kya buys Jincha, Riki. Naruto went to the right side of the bed, where Minato was. His eyes glowed with malice as he stood over the cage. He observed Minato breathing quietly, with neither his mouth nor nose making any noise. With a blink, Naruto glanced up at his mother, who was still snoring and had her mouth open. To stop the laughter from escaping his throat, Naruto bit his inner cheek. He dismissed it, glanced down at Minato once more, and pulled out a kunai he had discovered in the guest bedroom. He was going to thrust it forward while holding it over Minato, but he stopped when he reenacted the day's events. Hinata, his mother, cherished Minato. Recalling her words, as well as those of Hinata and Kushina, he growled silently, trying to put an end to Minato's life for good. The words, "Don't say that to your father," rushed through Kushina's mind. Naruto's hold on the kunai relaxed slightly, and he thrust his hand forward, saying, "I don't expect it to, but please try, for me." Before the kunai's tip even touched Minato's nose, it ceased. He was unable to do it. He lacked the will and motivation to accomplish it. No longer. He sneered at the man and scoffed. Naruto said, "You're not my father," in a low voice. "You can't be," Naruto said, leaving the room without giving a thought to whether he had awakened Kushina or Minato. He threw the kunai carelessly as he entered the hallway. It gained enough momentum to open the door after landing on it between the other two. Naruto had already descended half of the stairs when it squeaked open. After observing Naruto exit the room, a single azure orb gazed at the dim hallway before shutting. After 2 days, the meeting that Minato mentioned was taking place. For ignoring the council meeting like it was a balloon, Minato cursed himself. They would eventually put their nose where it didn't belong. "Kushina, please hang on to your temper. You've got a reputation as a hothead for some reason," Minato begged. She gave him a frown. "I do not, and for being stubborn and contrary." "I am not." Before it vanished, Minato's worn smile vanished as he surveyed the conference space. His advisor's decision to include every Jonin and clan head in the entire Stickin village was terrible. While everyone else was dispersed throughout the room, the clan heads were arranged in a line in front of Minato's desk. "Such a life, sigh." Everyone in the room fell silent as Minato said, quiet, in a quiet voice. The last thing anyone wanted was to annoy the notorious Yellow Flash. "Lord Hokage," yelled a random Jonin from behind. He said, "I heard rumors of Kumo declaring war on us," to which Minato muttered a curse. Although he hadn't heard anything similar, he wouldn't rule it out. He glanced at his spouse, who was hanging back with his pupils. She appeared concerned but unyielding. He remarked, "I have heard no such things and I highly doubt that it will happen," and he observed the audience becoming more relaxed. "No, there is something I need to announce, which is why I have called you here," they all said as they heard whispers coming from outside the room. They belonged to the secretary who served as the meeting's guard. Minato then heard a man's voice yelling something, then a softer, more tentative voice. Then the room's doors flew open, revealing a shy indigo-haired teen standing next to an impatient blonde. The blonde was dressed in black pants, black ninja shoes, and a blood-red sleeveless muscle shirt. The teenager with the indigo hair was standing next to him, dressed in the same navy blue pants and tan sweater that she usually wore. Everybody who looked at him had their mouths open and their eyes wide with surprise. Few people even nodded slightly at the newcomers. Minato said, "I'm glad you've arrived," with a hint of humor. In response, Naruto merely scoffed and let out a growl. Naruto responded, "Like I care," to which the Jonin gave him a few glares and sneers. A hand landed on Naruto's right shoulder as he glared back. He already knew who it was, so he didn't need to see. He let out a sigh and gave Hinata a nod without looking. A male Jonin questioned, "What are two children doing here?" and Naruto snarled. Before his wife could speak on his behalf, Minato cleared his throat. He said authoritatively, "I asked them to be here," and everyone looked at Minato as though he were crazy. When Minato stated, "They are the reason I called for this meeting," the audience began to whisper to themselves once more. Naruto used this time to survey the room and look around. Despite having so many people in one space, the room was quite large and provided plenty of breathing room. Two elderly people, a woman and a man, sat at Minato's sides as he sat behind a huge desk. He squeezed Hinata's left hand after his hand slipped up and caught it. With a smile, Hinata gave one of her own squeezes back. Naruto's eyes made contact with silver ones off to the side. Neji grinned as he stared back without flinching. As he watched, Minato noticed that his patience was beginning to waver. Only one person took notice, or at least took the time to speak for him. A man yelled, "Quiet, everyone, our youthful Hokage wishes to inform us with knowledge that will increase our own flames of youth." Naruto's eyes instantly shifted to a man with enormous eyebrows that resembled centipedes and a bowl-cut hairstyle. He was wearing a Jonin vest and a green jumpsuit. "What the devil? I'm not going to beat around the bush about it," Minato said, giving Naruto a final glance. "Thank you, guy," Minato said, receiving a nod from the man. Naruto's gaze expanded. He refused to. Obito angrily yelled, "Spit it out already," and scowled at the Jonin who attempted to silence him. When Kakashi attempted to silence him, he even pushed him back. Everyone who didn't already know turned to Naruto, their mouths open and their eyes wide with shock. "The boy, right over there, is my son," he said. When they bowed or knelt before him, Naruto snarled at them and even repressed the impulse to strike each of them. "Hypocrites." Naruto yelled, "Get up," and everyone gave him a strange look. "And now that you know who I am, you start bowing." "Cut the crap," he said, to a mixture of reactions from the audience. "I'm no different than the child that entered this room 10 minutes ago." Instead of laughing out loud, Minato, Kushina, Heishi, Neji, Kakashi, and Obito chose to smile, smirk, or snigger. Hinata wished she could become part of the wall, or at the very least, go back in time and prevent Naruto from losing his temper. When he told them, "I don't like suck-ups," the people who bowed mocked him. "Child," said the woman, one of the two elders, standing up. Her final statement, "It would be wise to behave and act respectful to your elders and superiors," gave Naruto the impression that she was denying him a choice. He said, "I don't like bullies, either," and his gaze briefly shifted to Neji, who was still grinning. "Anyway," Minato said, drawing the room's attention once more, "he's my son and after a long search, I have found him." Naruto opened his mouth to speak, but someone spoke before him. As he walked with a walking stick, another elderly man who resembled a mummy asked, "What makes you so sure?" "Danza," Minato muttered a snarl. "You say he's your son because he looks like you? How do we know it is not the work of cosmetics or surgery and he's just a spy from another village, sent here to gain the trust of the Hokage and learn of the village's secrets?" The Warhawk requested, and Minato's eyes narrowed. Kushina only avoided killing Danza because of Kakashi and Obito. The crowd began to whisper inaudibly, and Minato could hear the hesitancy in their voices. Naruto muttered, "Paranoid old man," which relieved the tension and made some of the younger Jonin stutter with laughter. Danza looked down at Naruto as he turned his head. Naruto did not recoil. Danza gave Naruto a phony smile and stated, "I am only concerned about the safety of my village." Obito flinched slightly but otherwise just glared at the elderly man. "Just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean there isn't an invisible shinobi waiting to strike me down when my back is turned," he said. When Minato said, "That's enough," everyone looked at him. Minato stated, "I have proof that he is my son," and then he removed a scroll from a vest pocket. Naruto recognized it the moment he laid eyes on it. Everyone tensed up but nodded in agreement when I said, "Everyone remembers the sealing jutsu my wife invented, right? The one that can steal your chakra with just a drop of your blood? The one that can only be activated by Uzumaki or Namikaze blood? When did you take one of my skulls, for crying out loud?" Kushina thought angrily, and Minato grinned naively and shed a few tears when he looked into her eyes. However, Minato's intentions were clear to anyone who wasn't a genius. He was far behind Naruto. Minato shook his head when Naruto said, "You tricked me," loud enough for him to hear. In response, Minato said, "I did it to convince you that I was telling you the truth and to make sure you were my son," and Naruto gave him a fierce look. It was really quite clever, and Naruto was the only one who respected cleverness, so he couldn't hold Minato responsible. Nevertheless, Naruto disliked being taken advantage of. Minato threw the scroll to Danza, who asked, "What is this nonsense?" Danza glanced at the scroll before turning to face him. "Try to activate it," he said. "Very simple, just concentrate and look for the bond trapped in the scroll." After doing so, Danza cursed and returned the scroll to Minato. "What did you feel?" "A bond. There's a connection between two chakra signatures surrounded by some sort of barrier. One of them is yours. I recognize it. But the Othera." When Naruto said, "belongs to me," someone in the room let out a gasp. "Ridiculous," said the male elder. Naruto looked at him doubtfully, then at Minato with awe. Naruto caught the scroll in his left hand after Minato tossed it to him. He closed his eyes and laid his right hand on top of Minato's blood. Minato put both hands on the desk in front of him to support his suddenly heavy body, and within seconds he was sweating and panting. One of the Jonin exclaimed, "Lord Hokage," and they hurried to his aid. He commanded, "Stop," and they did. Until he sensed Hinata's gaze on him, Naruto kept stealing chakra from Minato. He paused and rolled up the scroll after giving her a quick glance and biting his inner cheek. The entire room gazed at Naruto, who inhaled deeply and dabbed at a drop of perspiration on his forehead. Naruto was beginning to grasp it, but it still required a great deal of focus. Dropping the scroll, Naruto allowed it to roll until it veered to the left and came to a stop at a Jonin's feet. Leaning forward, the Jonin picked up the scroll. After examining it briefly, he used his Sharingan to look directly into Naruto's eyes. "One more. What is the number?" With a few significant distinctions, Naruto could tell that this man was Sasuke's brother. After turning off his Sharingan, Sasuke's brother nodded as though he agreed. He approached Minato and gave the scroll to him. Minato searched for his second wind and glanced at it. His voice was breathless as he asked, "Do you believe Amy now?" Before nodding, many of the Jonin exchanged glances. Naruto sarcastically remarked, "Great, I feel so accepted," drawing more glares from the Jonin. Naruto returned the glare. When Naruto heard Danza's voice behind him, he froze and asked, "What's this?" His Iwa forehead protector hung limply in his hands as his gaze shifted to him. Minato let his hands groan. "An Iwa forehead protector?" inquired the two senior advisors. Naruto claimed, "I was born and raised in Iwa, no big deal," but his assurance began to falter. He didn't believe he could fight the entire room head on, but he didn't want to show them that he was afraid or intimidated. After all, it was only half the fight to hide the fear from them. Danza thought to himself, so, he is from an enemy village, but everyone could hear him. "Yes," Minato reassured, "but he's no harm to us." Danza questioned, "That's all well and good, but can we take your word for it?" Minato, Kushina, and Naruto gave him a stern look. Naruto recalled the conversation he had with Hinata, Kushina, and Minato prior to their arrival here and thought, he's starting his plan. Minato paced in the center of the living room and said, "You will be faced with adversaries," while Naruto sneered as he reclined on the couch in Minato's house. Kushina sat on the smaller couch next to Naruto, and Hinata sat next to him. When Naruto said, "I don't care, let them hate me," Minato shook his head. "Normally, I'd agree, but you have a very influential man up against you. His name is Danza." Naruto muttered, "Sounds like a punk," which made his mother laugh. Minato disregarded his remark. When Minato told them, "If you cross him, he just might force me to imprison you, enslave you, or maybe even execute you," Naruto swallowed. Hinata did the same. Kushina simply tried not to lose his mind. "No way," Naruto exclaimed, panting. Minato merely gave a nod. Kushina questioned, "What are we going to do about it?" He said, "Nothing," which surprised them. "At least, not yet," he said, continuing to stare at Kushina and Naruto. With an ugly gleam in his eyes, Minato muttered, "Keep your tempers, both of you. Danza will have 3 plans to bring you down. A plan, a backup plan, and an ace in the hole. I'll shoot the first one down, and Kushina and I will help you with the second. The third is all yours, though." "Wah!" started Naruto. When Minato said, "We're running late, let's go," she left the house. He stopped before he could go very far and looked back at Naruto. "And please, leave your forehead protector off, at least until after the meeting." Naruto snarled but complied. taking off his forehead shield and putting it in his pocket. With some reluctance, Naruto thought, perhaps I should have left it home. Warm steel pressed against his arm, and when he looked down, he saw Hinata holding his forehead protector against him while keeping her gaze fixed on the screen. Naruto heard Minato say, I deny your request, and he saw the mummy. Man furious. Naruto grabbed his forehead protector and looked questioningly at Hinata. He said, thanks. What did I miss? And Hinata's gaze remained fixed on Danza. Naruto glared at Elder Danza, exclaiming, Elder Danza tried to enslave you, interrogate you for Iwa's secrets and or weaknesses and basically turn you into a mindless tool. But your father shut him down. There's no proof of that, you look like him. I also look like my sensei, not really, and besides, you were able to activate the chakra, absorbing scroll. Naruto said, I could be Kushina's sister's kid or long-lost second cousin, but even he knew that was a pathetic attempt at an excuse. Hinata's deadpan expression was enough to let him know that. Shut up, Inoa. Naruto moaned as Danza continued, I know you might want to treat this boy like a king, Lord Hokage, but consider the village. He deliberately raised the volume so Danza could hear, but Danza remained silent. Am I to understand that you were willing to put the safety of the entire village into the hands of this boy whose allegiance belongs to our enemy? He turned and looked at all the clan heads and Jonin in the crowd. He asked, do you think it is fair to leave the decision up to one man? And everyone began discussing it. As they conversed, Naruto noticed some turn and gaze at him. It didn't seem like things were going his way. A loud roar reverberated throughout the room as Minato slammed his hands on the table. They all turned to look at the man they all respected and feared. Even though he had an expressionless face, everyone could tell how angry he was. He gave Danza a look that could have turned the man into a block of ice. Whether or not he's my son is not the question, nor is it the problem here. I will refuse to enslave or interrogate any child, no matter what background or heritage, he said. Everyone was shivered by the statement. You have managed to keep it hidden, but I know the truth, and when I find the proof I need, you will hang. But Danza recovered. You let your emotions get the best of you, Hokage, he said, placing his hands behind his back. I agree. Minato growled, Lord Hokage to you, and Danza gave a nod. Regardless of his birthright, you cannot deny that this is the perfect opportunity to learn of Iwa's weaknesses and finally get the upper hand on them. Or at the very least, use him as a bargaining item. Minato reminded him, I already denied your request, and Danza used his right hand to rub his chin. Yes, I know, but this is a new proposal, one that will be decided by the Jonin and clan heads of Konoha. Minato growled, expressing his annoyance at being ignored. I already denied it, he said. Minato clenched his fist in response to Danza's question. Yes, but didn't you once say that decisions that affect Konoha as a whole should not be made by one man alone? I did, Minato replied, albeit reluctantly. It was obvious to him that Danza had put him in a difficult political situation. He had said that anyone could vote on his decision if they felt it was biased and unfair. Goddamn his generosity. Danza assumed, and I feel that this should be taken under consideration of the very people who fight to protect our home. Who knows, maybe Iwa plans to start another war because we hold one of their own, and many Jonin began to mutter agreements in silence. This was bad, and Minato, Kushina, Hinata, and Naruto knew it. There were more murmurs of agreement. Who are we to waste the lives of brave men and women for the life of one who is not even our own kind? Very well then. We vote upon what we will do with the Iwa.nin. Let those who wish to let the Hokage decide vote for, and those who favor to gather as much information about Iwa from him vote against. All in fav. Wait, mentioned Heishi. I invoke my right as clan head to reduce the vote to the clan heads and honored elders alone. On what grounds, Lord Haya, Ga? Minato inquired, concealing his enthusiasm behind a composed exterior. With his mask stoic, Heishi turned to face Minato. Gulping, Naruto turned to face Hinata. Was her dad there? On the grounds that there exists a great deal of information about this matter that everyone in this room is unaware of. It would be impractical to attempt to explain it all. Seconded, muttered Shikaku wearily. Accord, Kushina continued. 3 votes yea, honored elder, she said, sarcastically. Let the clan heads and the honored elders make this decision. Danza sneered, you are neither honored elder nor clan head, and Kushina grinned. She responded, not true, I still retain my status as Uzumaki clan head, and she nearly burst out laughing at Danza's outburst. I'm just married to Lord Hokage and bore his child. There was too much information, and Naruto shrank in disgust. Nevertheless, his heart started beating once more. Heishi had made a wise decision. Naruto had no prayer if it meant he would be the proverbial lamb in a room full of men and women who feared war. He had a chance now that it was down to the clan heads and the honored elders. But Danza was not far away. Konoha would soon receive a letter from Iwa, and if Naruto knew the elderly man as well as he believed, it was probably not going to be good news. His heart began to race in his chest, but he hoped it wouldn't be for a few more days given how lucky he'd been lately. Danza was obviously not trying to worm his way out of this, but Minato could almost see him trying. Very well, Danza remarked after inhaling deeply. My interests lie in preserving the health and safety of the village. I vote for the child to be arrested and given a thorough interrogation. Another man approached Danza and cast a critical gaze on everyone in his immediate vicinity. He was identified by Naruto as the officer from the previous 2 evenings. As do I, for the same reasons. The two caused Naruto's eyes to narrow. Then Kushina spoke. I've spent the last 3 days with him. In those 3 days, I've gotten to know him fairly well. He's a good kid. I vote to allow the Hokage to decide. Heishi told them, I say to allow the Hokage to decide, and Minato gave a grateful nod. As do we, Shikaku stated, referring to himself and his 2 companions, Inoichi and Chaoza. This is not a solution, it is merely an action. Bad guys 2, Naruto 5. Naruto looked at the person in front of him. This woman had the same untamed appearance as Kiba. After giving it some thought, Naruto struck his forehead with his palms. It was just his luck. My instincts tell me that he'd do more good behind a cell with INT searching for information in his skull. I vote for the interrogation, she said with a sigh. A man wearing sunglasses nodded his head in agreement. Logic tells me that if we can prevent any further fighting in the future between our 2 villages, we should not let opportunity slip our grasp, he said. I vote for the interrogation. According to the 2 revered elders, we also agree with the Abarame's reasoning. Sweat trickled down Naruto's forehead as he mentally calculated the answer. Right now, he didn't have a good chance because the opposition had 1 more vote than he did. At last, Naruto caught sight of the final man standing distantly. He wore a dark stole with a deep cowl on it and a dark purple, nearly black robe over his head. No one could see past the shadows that lay beneath the cowl, despite the fact that the sun shone on the entire room. He stood taller than everyone else in the room. His hands were buried in the thick sleeves of his robe, and his arms were folded. The last member caught everyone's attention, and the room fell silent, more so than the neighboring valley of the end. Long pauses were followed by a quiet prompt from Danza. Honored eldest one, what say you? Despite his best efforts to hide it, Naruto found himself leaning forward a little, his mouth parched. He had no doubt that an Anbu would suddenly show up and knock him unconscious before the eldest one's voice could be heard if he voted against Naruto. But he remained silent. Danza said, Eldest one, in a more stern tone, how do you vote? The cowl of the eldest one lifted a little. He gave a cryptic response, I must hear what word brings the messenger. Obito blurted out, what messenger? And as soon as he did, the doors slammed open, revealing a man wearing a Jonin vest running past his fellows and up to the Hokage. Minato started to say, Azumo, what? But was interrupted when he saw the folded paper on his desk. Breathlessly, he said, I have a message from Iwa, and everyone's eyes instantly fell on Naruto. He gave them a scowl. What? With a tone that implied he was aware, Danza questioned, what does the message say? Before the paper crumpled in Minato's hands, he read the message on it. When Minato said, the Tsuchikage wishes the return of his shinobi. Danza asked haughtily, and what if we say no? Minato gave him a glare. War, was the succinct but undoubtedly unappealing response. Everyone's faces lit up with panic, and even Naruto became a little restless. War? Hinata asked again, unsure and terrified, and Minato gave a nod. As the room descended into chaos at the prospect of war, side chatter began to increase. In order to make the Tsuchikage reconsider going to war, Kushina could hear that most conversations involved either merely returning Naruto to them or threatening to kill him. She noticed that her husband had heard them when she looked up at him. Bring order back into the room, Minato said, slamming his hands back on the desk. We do not fear petty threats, Minato declared to the group, his voice resonating with his strength and command. And we do not respond well to bullies. Danza proposed, then let them have the boy. They will leave us alone and we can get on with our lives. We can continue to live in peace. Danza was told by Heishi, peace cannot be bought, honored Danza, history teaches that lesson. I learned it. You should have, too. I don't know what you're babbling on about but. Naruto gave an eye roll. When Naruto said, he's talking about the first Hokage capturing and spreading out the bija to the other elemental nations, dolt. He had attempted to purchase peace with compromise but look how each village acts towards each other. He noticed that everyone, including Hinata, Minato, and Kushina, was staring at him strangely. Silently, what? I know my trivia, he said. You are not recognized, Iwa.nin. Until you have the floor, you will refrain from such outbursts or I will have you removed from this meeting. Crossing his arms across his chest, Naruto gritted his teeth. Sorry. Here, I thought you guys wanted to protect your own people from death. What was I thinking? Danza yelled, if we are dead, we will not protect anyone, child. Be silent or be removed. Minato growled, Danza, grabbing the man's attention. Danza winced at his tone but nodded nonetheless. I don't know who you think you are, but you are not the Hokage of this village. I am, the man said. Minato commanded, you will watch your tone of voice while in my presence, and the mummy nodded once more. The head of the feral clan asked, can we get back to the vote? Minato kept looking at Danza before nodding and looking at the eldest one. The eldest one merely gazed at Naruto when Minato asked, how do you vote? His cowl was facing him, or at least that was how it appeared. He said, the Chunin exams is nearing, which left everyone perplexed. The eldest one turned his cowl toward Danza, who asked, what? He went on, I say we put the child through a trial. One mission, one Chunin exam. The head of the Uchiha clan began, what kind of stupidity, but was cut off. I see, muttered Minato. He clarified, a sort of test, and the eldest one gave a nod. And the eldest one shook his head. What kind of test is this? A test of loyalty. We already know where his loyalty stands. It stands beside our enemy, Danza said. The details are a bit sketchy at best, but I believe this trial will put to rest the fears of one side of the issue, or prove falsely placed the faith of the other, the eldest said quietly. A shiver went down Naruto's spine as he eyed the eldest one. There was something unusual about this man. The trial seems vague at best, Danza was quoted as saying. The eldest one asked, but when have I ever led the village astray? And everyone in the room had to concur that his words were always beneficial to the village. Fine, Danza grudgingly acknowledged. Minato merely grinned. Minato reiterated, it's decided then. One mission and one chance at the Chunin exams, and the respected elders and clan heads nodded in agreement. Shikaku questioned, but who says the boy will agree to it? And everyone's gaze once more shifted to Naruto. He squeezed Hinata gently as he felt her tighten her hold on his hand. Looks like it's sink or swim, Naruto muttered to himself. Letting go of Hinata's hand, he approached the Hokage. The crowd parted in half as he did, letting Naruto get close to Minato. Naruto raised his head and met Minato's eyes directly. Minato paused and said, Genin of the Hidden Rock, Naruto. Naruto chuckled. Naruto of the Blazing Galea Lord Hokage, he said, breathing heavily as he politely addressed Minato. Minato gave his son a proud smile. With his gaze fixed on the eldest one, Naruto addressed the heads of each clan and respected elders, asking, Naruto of the Blazing Gale. Do you accept the offer? Power leaked from the man, though he wasn't sure if he was the only one who could see it. It was not a typical power. It was an old-fashioned power, the same, if not older, as that of the Kya-bai. Naruto turned his gaze to Minato and a defiant smirk came to his lips. Yeah. I accept. Excellent, said Minato. Minato scowled at Danza as he proposed, however, till then, I suggest the boy be put under probation. Nothing extreme. Just have him be under the supervision of a trustworthy shinobi. Danza grinned when Minato said, and I'm guessing you have a candidate in mind? Minato asked, observing the faces of his fellow comrades. I don't suppose I have much choice in this. If Naruto was constantly being watched, they would appear more at ease. Fine. The remainder of the meeting was devoted to dull topics. They were dull to Naruto, at least. Until he brought up Kumo abducting Hinata, that is. Outraged remarks and thoughts of retaliation erupted throughout the room. Naruto fled before being drawn into it once more, so he was unaware of what transpired next. He chose not to bring Hinata along. She appeared to be a little used to that kind of thing, but he didn't think it was fair to abandon her in that mess. In any case, Naruto kept telling himself that. He now merely sat on a tree branch outside the structure where the meeting was held. If you knew where to look, it was a fairly large building close to the Hokage's office. With his eyes closed, Naruto mentally reenacted the entire encounter. Danza had attempted to obtain information about Iwa and put him in jail. Should Iwa go too far, they might even murder him. If it came to that, Naruto was certain that he would be used as a human shield against Iwa. However, Minato had prevented that from occurring. Kushina, the head of Ga, and the other three had all done the same. Despite the fact that he barely knew any of them, they all stood up for him, and vice versa. He couldn't hold the glasses guy responsible for his decision. He was only using reason to ensure peace. But the wild woman was nothing more than a bitch. it's simple. Nor was the head of Uchiha a particularly kind man. He and the other two geezers were old fools. However, what was the tale of the oldest one? Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he saw the eldest one. Not a very good hiding spot, he said. Wasn't hiding, was a false statement. The older of the two said, "May I speak to you for a second, my child?" With a groan, Naruto stumbled backward, flipped his body in mid-fall, and landed on his feet. He approached the eldest one. The eldest one laughed as Naruto muttered, "What's up with everyone claiming me as their kid?" The man said, "I never tell a lie," with a chuckle. As he watched the older of the two attempt to put a hand on Naruto's head, Naruto arched an eyebrow but remained silent. Naruto couldn't move his body, but normally he wouldn't allow anyone to touch him the way the elder attempted to. When the eldest one's hand finally reached the top of Naruto's head through the opening, time seemed to slow down. Images flashed through Naruto's mind in less than a second, causing his eyes to widen. His brain thumping against the walls of its prison, he grabbed his head and collapsed to his knees. Pictures of men and women dead on the ground, dreadful pictures. Buildings were demolished and burned, and children were reduced to ashes where they stood. Naruto witnessed some of Konoha's citizens fleeing in terror and perish when an unexpected foe struck them. Back in Iwa, he witnessed the murder, burning, and displacement of his own people. Still, many more pictures flashed by. It was an obvious message. There was no escaping death. Naruto was crying and clutching his knees when he regained consciousness. The eldest one was standing above him when he looked up. My, he sobbed. You're a very special child. Fearful, anxious, and furious, Naruto questioned, what did you do to me? To which the older man replied, I showed you a possibility. My left hand is quite the pessimistic, you see, the eldest one said, bending over and slowly extending his right hand forward. Naruto screamed, no, and made every effort to keep as far away from the man in front of him as possible. I never want to go through that again. And you won't, my child, he said, placing his right hand on Naruto's head. Naruto felt as though his mind was traveling at 100 miles per hour once more. This time, the pictures came as softly and swiftly as a gust of wind. His mind was filled with pictures of kids playing and men and women strolling around Konoha and Iwa in peace and without a care in the world. He observed his friends as some older living new lives with new pets and family. An overall feeling of peace and joy filled Naruto's heart. Never in his life had he felt so at peace. It ended far too quickly, and when Naruto woke up, he heard whimpers and discovered that more tears were streaming down his cheeks. However, they were filled with longing and joy rather than grief or rage. Naruto glanced up at the man in the robes. Whoa. He declared, I am the eldest one, and Naruto could hear the smile in the man's voice despite not being able to see it. With hesitation, Naruto said, Is Thisa my future? And the man nodded. Which one? Whichever you want. It is up to you to decide whether or not the future is a bright one or a dark one, the youngest replied. As he stood up, Naruto pleaded, Tell me what to do. For the better one, I don't want to live in destruction. He denied, saying, It is not for me to tell you, if I did, your future could easily change to one far worse than what I have showed you. Naruto snarled. Then what was the point in showing me them? The eldest one lectured Naruto, to let you know that the decisions you make will affect all of mankind, he said. He stopped and watched as Naruto hung on to every word he said. You are but one man, one child, he said. But you are very powerful, very influential. Only you can decide how you'll use it. I still don't understand. When the man's left hand reached up and rested on Naruto's head, he flinched and said, I know, child, but he was relieved that nothing happened. Someday you will come to understand, but for now, just know that we're all counting on you, even if not all of us know it. The oldest one retreated a step. After saying, farewell for now, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the man departed and vanished into thin air. Naruto simply gazed at the spot where the eldest one used to be before shaking his head and blotting his eyes. Turning away from the Hokage's office, Naruto muttered, crazy old fool, and started to wander. Still, it was way too real to be a fake. Maybe he's right. Naruto paused and turned to face the voice calling out to him. Hey, you, he said. A man with long, white hair approached him. When the man approached Naruto, he froze and muttered some unintelligible words. What do you want? Called Naruto. The white-haired man knocked him out before he could blink, leaving him with no time to react. What a day. Hinata moaned as she was brought back to awareness. She closed her eyes and rubbed her head as she sat up. She didn't need the headache hammering at her skull to be made worse by the tiny bit of light that was already slipping past her eyelids. Hinata heard Neji ask, Are you all right, Lady Hinata? Since he never dared to reveal their true friendship to strangers, she figured they weren't alone. Hinata opened her eyes slowly, willing to risk the pain, to see silver eyes looking at her worriedly. She closed her eyes once more after grinning. She replied, "I'm fine," and then attempted to sit up. A bad idea. Neji said, "Stay down, Lady Hinata. You still seem lightheaded," and Hinata hummed in agreement as her head touched a soft surface. Hinata asked, "What happened?" and thought she heard Neji suppress a laugh. He was standing next to her, his back to her, when she opened her left eye. She looked around and saw that she was in the lounge of the Jonin. If Neji wasn't at home or at the training grounds with his former teammates, she would occasionally find him sleeping here after a mission. As he went to the cabinets and removed the supplies needed to make tea, he recalled, "You were inundated with a lot of questions, and then you hyperventilated and fainted. Tea?" he inquired. Hinata said, "Yes," as she looked around the room once more. With enough space for at least half of the village's Jonin and enough room for them to sleep on the beds and couches arranged tastefully throughout the space, it was modest for a Jonin's lounge. A man she hadn't seen in years was sitting in one of the couches next to her. The man said, "Hiya," and Hinata blinked, flushed, and sat up simultaneously. She bowed her head and smiled sheepishly at him. She said, "Hello Jiraiya of the Sanin. I hope that your latest journey was a pleasant one," and Jiraiya grinned in response. Jiraiya praised Hinata, saying, My. With every passing generation, the Lady Hiya Ga always surpasses the last in terms of beauty, which made Hinata blush even more. Neji doused the teabag in the cup with hot water and cautioned, "Be careful where you tread, Lord Jiraiya. Her latest batch of suitors would not like that." Hinata would likely make a tomato appear white in comparison if her blush continued to darken. "Oh," Jiraiya said, raising an eyebrow in obvious interest. "So, you're quite popular with the men of this village, eh?" She said, I don't think so," while holding her hands together and gazing at them. Jiraiya bellowed so loudly that it was likely audible to anyone within a mile. Hinata sensed the beginning of another weak spell. When Hinata heard a startled shout behind her, she nearly jumped out of her skin. Naruto was sitting up and looking around when she turned to face the bed closest to her. After their gazes met, Naruto turned red and turned to face the ceiling. Her eyes narrowed slightly as a fleeting memory flashed through her mind. Naruto? That was mean. He muttered, "I know, sorry," and threw his legs over the edge of the bed to stand. He glanced over at Neji, then at Jiraiya, who blinked. "You?" Naruto snarled as he charged at Jiraiya, his fist clenched. Naruto approached Jiraiya and threw his fist forward, but Jiraiya didn't even blink. Jiraiya was able to move behind Naruto with his hideous arm gripping his wrist before Naruto could blink. He held the arm high and pinned it behind Naruto's back. Naruto moaned as his arm began to hurt. "Calm down," Jiraiya whispered to himself. Naruto growled as he sensed the Kya-Bai's chakra beginning to surge through his chakra network. "Take care of yourself." After shouting, Naruto felt the tainted chakra gradually go away. Naruto felt the anger that clouded his judgment and reasoning go away, suggesting that some of his own anger was released with the chakra. Naruto was able to twist his body just enough to break free from the giant man's grip before Jiraiya could intervene. Jiraiya was taken aback by Naruto's escape from the hold. Although it wasn't a difficult hold, it shouldn't have been that easy given their disparate sizes and strengths. After turning around and removing his hand from Jiraiya rather roughly, he might add a Naruto punched him in the face. As his hand bounced off Jiraiya's face, more pain sent shivers up his arm. Jiraiya stepped back, his hand leaping up to hold his cheek, his eyes wide. He was shocked that a so-called genin was able to hit him and cause him to feel the pain, but he didn't recoil from it because there wasn't much of it. Jiraiya calmed down and then grinned down at Naruto, who was shaking his right hand. That apparently caused him more pain than Jiraiya. Jiraiya laughed when Naruto questioned, "What the hell are you made of?" Hinata was standing next to Naruto. Hinata asked, "Are you okay?" but got no response. Naruto was too preoccupied with scowling at Jiraiya. Jiraiya remarked, "You really are your mother's child." Naruto's scowl turned dubious. Naruto asked, "How do you know her?" and his mother entered with a delicious smelling bag as if to respond. Naruto was immediately drawn to it. "I see you're up," Kushina grinned. Jiraiya told her, "I took care of him," but the mother-son pair gave her a glare in return. As he gave Hinata her tea, Neji muttered something to himself. She expressed her gratitude. Together, the two Uzumakis exclaimed, "You were the one who knocked him out." Jiraiya's arms were folded across his chest. "Yeah, well." Neji sat on the couch where Hinata used to lie and said, "Ah, yes, His words caused Naruto to blink at him. I remember what happened when he brought him to Lord Hokage, he said. What happened? As Neji heard the doors behind him explode, he was already picking Hinata up off the ground. When he looked back, he saw Jiraiya running and holding an unconscious Naruto. When Jiraiya exclaimed, I found him, Minato, Kushina, Heishi, Kakashi, and Obito all gave Jiraiya a deadpan look. Jiraiya was still grinning blindly. I found Naruto. Jiraiya. Sensei, Yuha. Kushina yelled, you idiot, and struck Jiraiya across the face. Naruto fell toward the ground as he flew back and struck the doors from which he had come. Before he could hit the ground, Kushina grabbed him. We found him days ago. Jiraiya merely moaned and held his head in his hands from his position. With a drop of perspiration, Naruto gazed at Jiraiya. A vein grew in Jiraiya's forehead as Naruto questioned doubtfully, forgetting the bag with the delicious scent, and you're one of 3 legendary Sannin? Naruto nodded in response to Kushina's question, so, you already know who he is? I was told to avoid him and the other 2, Naruto added to her statement. Something about not being ready to fight him or some bull like that. In Iwa? Hinata inquired as to Kushina's thoughts. Naruto gave a nod. Naruto looked off into space and remarked, I was raised to fight many of Konoha's infamous shinobi. It wasn't easy. He was mentally reliving his memories as he flipped through them. Naruto. He blinked at her as Kushina put a hand on his shoulder. What's wrong? Naruto gritted his teeth. It's nothing, he stated falsely. Hinata and Kushina exchanged glances. He told them, listen, I need some time alone to think some things over, and started to leave. He paused, then approached Kushina and gave her a hug. Despite gasping in shock, Kushina gave the hug back. With his hands behind his back and a slight smile, Naruto started to leave Hinata. Neji placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder and said, hold on, he recalled, you're under probation, remember? And Naruto let out a sigh. Neji looked around at the other 3 people in the room. I'll go with him. I'll see you later, Lady Hinata. Hinata gave a nod. He bowed, Lady Kushina, Lord Jiraiya, and they bowed in return. Without saying anything more, the 2 teenagers departed. Kushina glanced down at her hands and blinked. He took the bag, exclaimed Kushina, her cheeks watering wildly. My ramen was in there. As Naruto's physical body wandered, so did his mind. Naruto was grateful that Neji followed him without an acrimonious word. Naruto actually forgot that Neji was pursuing him for a brief period of time. He only recalled it because they had previously run into a girl who knew who Neji was. She was a pretty girl with brown hair who had a peculiar sense of style, but she managed to pull it off. With the exception of Hinata and his mother, the majority of the Konoha kunoichi Naruto had encountered thus far were more equally preoccupied with their appearance than with their training. If the dirt and perspiration all over her were any indication, the brown-haired girl appeared more focused on her training. Naruto had eaten the 2 bowls of ramen before he had even left the building housing the Jonin's lounge, and he was now leaning against the guardrail of a bridge that hung over a river. He simply followed his feet, not sure what had led him there. Although Naruto was unable to provide an explanation, he had the impression that Neji was familiar with the location. Since he lived in Konoha, it was easy to believe, but still. Minato Namikaze, his father, the Yellow Flash, the 4th Hokage. Even though he didn't have all the pieces, it made sense logically given what he had, including everything that had been said, physical similarities, biological evidence, and everything he had ever been told between the time of his first conscious memory and the present. Since he was the son of the Red Whirlpool and the Yellow Flash, it stands to reason that he took some time to get to know his mother. She was a real badass, Naruto thought. In an ideal world, he would be able to discover the true identity of his father and would have no reason to deny it. However, his world was flawed. Worse, it was populated by skilled assassins and shinobi whose only goal was to kill and deceive for their village. It's possible that Minato or even his own Mothera is lying to him in order to keep him here so Konoha can take advantage of him. Naruto, however, believed that was not the case. Although he couldn't pinpoint the reason, he was certain Minato wasn't deceiving him. That man didn't seem like him. In any case, Naruto was unable to get the hatred for the man to leave him. Naruto knew he had to overcome this unreasonable animosity, even though it would not be simple and would take time. This trial. There was an issue. He didn't require the love or approval of Konoha. He had to get home as soon as possible. However, he would not return by himself. Without a family or true friends, his previous existence was meaningless. That life was no longer his to live, and he had no intention of returning to it. Now he had a mother and a friend, a real friend he trusted more than anyone else. He didn't want Minato in his life and would be fine without him, regardless of whether he was his biological father or not. However, he needed to exercise patience. The moment would arrive, but not right now. He would bring Kushina and Hinata to Iwa, where they would begin a new life as close friends and a loving family. Perhaps close friends. Perhaps even. Neji, who appeared to be deep in thought as well, caught Naruto's azure gaze. Naruto wasn't sure if he could defeat him without suffering some damage, and he might become a problem in the near future. He wasn't the only barrier, either. Even when he wasn't angry, Hinata's father had a frightening appearance. Such a man was likely on par with the Yellow Flash, and Naruto had no illusions about facing him. If Naruto wanted to bring Kushina and Hinata along, he needed to become stronger, faster, and more cunning. The game required patience, and Naruto already sensed that he was at a significant disadvantage. He was accustomed to being the underdog, so it didn't bother him. "You okay?" Naruto blinked and turned to face Neji, who was staring at him strangely despite his best efforts to maintain a stoic face. Naruto noticed that his hands were firmly gripping the guard railing when he looked down. Naruto wouldn't have been shocked if each of his knuckles had popped. They were as white as snow. His vice grip creaked with a sigh as he released the rail. Naruto frowned inwardly at his fleeting error as he noticed the tiny dent he had made on the rail. The chakra of the Kya-bai then tingled his hands. He apparently injured himself, but he was unable to feel anything. He said, "I'm fine," but his tone belied what he said. "It is none of my business." "You're right," Naruto cut in. "But it seems to me that something is troubling you. If you'd like, I can help you." "I can be very objective and logical," Neji said, disregarding what he had said before. "I'm fine," Naruto growled and repeated. Neji said, "Fair enough," while he kept his gaze fixed on the flowing water. "I understand that I haven't given you a reason to trust me as a friend or even as an acquaintance. I doubt anyone has really earned your trust since your arrival here." Naruto did not respond to him in any way. Neji went on, "Even worse, you're from Iwa. I heard everyone truly despises this tree. Huggers," to which Naruto looked up. "From the oldest war veterans to the youngest baby, we are all corrupt and do our best to destroy our enemies, especially the Iwa.nin. As a result, we cannot be trusted. Lady Hinata doesn't care for you," Neji said, realizing that his words had no effect on him at all. Despite the fact that it was a cheap shot, Neji had to know Naruto's character, and that final remark caused him to look at him impassively. "She's sorry about you. The night you made her cry, she told me as much. She admitted to me that she used to believe she was only assisting you because she genuinely cared about you, but in reality, she feels sorry for you because you are the most pitiful person on the planet. Without your connections to Lord Hokage and Lady Uzumaki, Lady Hinata probably wouldn't ever talk to you again." Neji had to give Naruto credit because he maintained a calm and emotionless poker face, but he had already noticed his warning signs. His ears turned a slightly redder shade, and his fists twitched a little. "What does it feel like to fight against fate's grasp only to succumb to its influence? No one is above the decree of destiny, not me, not Lord Hokage, and especially not you," Neji said, and he could see that his words were on the verge of making him lose his temper. With Naruto just 2 inches shorter than him, Neji stepped forward and gazed down at him, saying, "Accept it and go home, lowly Iwa. Orphan." It was that. Neji nearly missed it, but he was able to leap away in time to see Naruto sliced by a red chakra. Only claw that emerged from his back. When Neji noticed that Naruto's pupils took on a slit-like shape and that his chakra arm retreated to his back, he thought, "That's new." Naruto growled as he stooped slightly and then dashed down the space between them, and Neji dropped into his stance, spinning with his chakra gushing out of his pores. Neji was surrounded by a dome of chakra, and Naruto crashed into it head-on. He attempted to break through, but the chakra was too strong and even started to sting his face. He was finally thrown back and slid to a stop a few meters from the spinning dome, which stopped, and Neji reappeared. The original Naruto threw his hands up, and without using hand signals, a clone materialized over him. The clone held on, and Naruto threw the clone at Neji, who was momentarily taken aback because he was not used to such tactics. Neji's right shoulder was driven deep into his stomach by the clone, which managed to fly between the gaps in time to send him hurtling into the river before both of them hit the water. Neji gasped and all of his air escaped. He knew he couldn't kill Neji, but he was determined to make him regret opening his mouth, so Naruto ran to the river and stared down at it, looking for him. Naruto was caught off guard when Neji leapt up from the river a few feet to the left, spun vertically, and then swung his right leg down to strike Naruto in the head. Naruto's head ricocheted down, and when he looked back up, he saw Neji's right palm being thrust forward, sending invisible chakra, compressed air flying forward and striking his sternum. Naruto stepped back just as another bullet of compressed air flew off Neji's left palm, and while both palms were still in the air, Neji positioned them back before they shot forward, causing a larger and more powerful bullet of compressed air to strike Naruto in the chest with such force that it sent him rolling away and strayed to the ground. Naruto used the momentum to roll to his feet, and Neji just gave him a smirk before he landed on his feet and fell back into his stance, to which Naruto replied with a growl. Naruto was up in the air until two of his clones grabbed Neji's sides and slammed him into the ground, causing him to feel air leave his lungs again, but it was worse when the original Naruto landed on his chest. Naruto dashed down the gap, appeared in front of Neji, and sent an uppercut to Neji's chin, which connected. Just as Neji kicked his feet up and jumped to his feet, a little ungracefully, Naruto might add, he flipped away and landed on the river. Neji stared at Naruto, panting as he tried to catch his second wind, then smirked once more and started to run away. Eventually, after following him through the flurry of trees and rocks, Neji stopped close to a clearing surrounded by trees, 3 tall stumps that were likely used for taijutsu training, and a river at the other end of the clearing. Naruto growled as he followed after Neji, but he never made it to him. Naruto ran up to Neji without stopping and threw his right fist forward, but Neji saw it coming and proceeded to dodge to the left, bending forward because Naruto's right flank was open. Using a little extra chakra, he raised his right leg and kicked Naruto's stomach, sending him 10 feet into the air. A devilish smirk appeared on Neji's face as he thrust his right palm up, and Naruto saw it. Another bullet of air shot up and struck Naruto's stomach once more, sending him higher. Neji then sent another bullet to Naruto's chest with his left palm, sending him higher. Another struck him in the face, sending him spinning in midair, and a final, dual palm sent him skyrocketing into the air and landing in the river. Neji sighed as he turned his arms around and rested them in front of him in a position akin to pushing something down. A moment later, an army of Naruto clones leapt out of the river and landed on the grass. They were wet from the water but blazing with rage, and they charged forward with the intention of beating Neji to the ground. 3 clones threw themselves at Neji, who dodged each one, causing them to land with a roll and face him. More clones threw themselves, but Neji continued to move forward, avoiding or parrying them off. When Neji realized he was in the middle of the army, he realized it had been a set-up. Naruto had made him think that was their goal when, in reality, they only wanted to support him because he knew his clones couldn't catch him. Neji felt the clones summoning a tremendous amount of chakra, and even from a distance, the power behind it made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He hurried to stop them before it was too late, but he stopped just as a clone zipped past. Neji turned to see all 10 of the Naruto clones he had avoided taking a breath. Looking to his left, he saw clones throwing clones at him, faster than before, but Neji was able to keep up until one of them grabbed his left sleeve and knocked him down. Neji slammed his palm on the clone, ending its existence, and he leapt to his feet, ideally before the clones could exploit his time on the ground. Neji moaned, but otherwise he was emotionless, even as he grabbed the clone's right leg and started spinning, releasing the clone at the peak of his spin and it crashed into other clones. Another clone appeared behind him and kicked Neji's left flank. Neji started spinning again, this time allowing his chakra to escape his pores, after spotting more clones coming from above. The 5 or so clones struck the chakra dome before vanishing in a cloud of smoke, and when Neji stopped, he felt movement beneath him. It was slight, and for a moment, Neji dismissed it as unimportant, but then he realized that he should have moved when he first felt it. Neji's eyes snapped open as Naruto leapt out of the ground and slammed both of his fists into his sternum, sending him flying backwards. He landed and slid to a painful stop before smoke engulfed it, revealing a Naruto clone. Naruto felt something snap in his lower back before he was wiped out of existence, but before he could yell at the fallen clone, Neji appeared behind him and delivered a hard kick to his lower back. When a clone attempted to punch Neji's head, Neji grabbed his arm and threw him into the air, but the clone somehow succeeded in holding onto Neji's wrist with both hands, and as the momentum from Neji's toss ran out, he started to fall, placing his feet on Neji's stomach with his knees bent. When his back struck the ground, Naruto pulled down at Neji's arm and kicked his feet up. Even though Neji saw the clones off in the side blowing out their breaths and calling forth fire, he was unconcerned. The clones merged together, and a giant dragon roared to life and flew towards Neji. Neji whirled and encircled himself with a whole dome of chakra, which was designed to shield him from the flames, before the dragon devoured him. Rotation! As the dragon swallowed him whole, he yelled. But Neji could feel the heat trapped deep in the dragon's belly, and he sweated as he spun on, keeping up his technique until the dragon vanished, pausing and panting as he watched the remaining 100 clones stare at him with calculating, cold blue eyes. They just turned to smoke after that, leaving only one Naruto. "Are you finally going to believe me?" Neji inquired, and Naruto merely arched an eyebrow. Neji was impressed by Naruto, who was a genin but possessed strong jutsu, extraordinary physical and chakra stamina, an analytical mind, and the genuine offspring of his parents. Neji was on pins and needles as Naruto spilled his blood over the center of the scroll, and he could only speculate as to what he would do with it. There was writing that Neji knew was used to store things. A black hilt with a worn, dirty orange ribbon tied to the pommel and a clean white blade with some reddish brown stains on the ribbon that Neji recognized as dried blood appeared. Naruto hurried down the gap between him and Neji without a word or a change of expression, and swung his ninjutsu down, giving Neji just enough time to jump back before the blade harmlessly passed over his left forearm, or so Neji believed. Neji's left arm started to sting as blood sprayed in the air, and he looked down at his wound, which was not a superficial cut, but he would not die from it either. Neji had to look at the ninjutsu again before he saw something was wrong. Neji remarked, somewhat intrigued, "Wind chakra. Fire and wind. You know how to make good use of your two affinities. I understand why your father permitted you to take the exams." Neji sent chakra to his hands as he watched Naruto dash to him, but Naruto only grunted as he spun the ninjutsu in his palm and then pumped more of his wind chakra into the blade, making the chakra more visible. Neji used his chakra powered palms to parry Naruto's horizontal swing, and it bounced off his palm as though it had struck a tilted metallic object. Despite Neji's technique, Naruto continued to attack him, repeatedly swinging his ninjutsu from various angles, and Neji kept up with him, parrying all of his attacks without getting any scratches. When he felt cold steel pressing against the back of his neck, he froze all his movements, momentarily taken aback when Naruto spun and suddenly drove his right foot into Neji's stomach, causing him to double over and hold his stomach. "When are you going to start paying attention to me?" It was dangerous to take Naruto lightly, Neji realized now, as his tone was cold and impassive, reminiscent of Minato's own whenever he heard him talk to Fugaku. Neji raised his legs off the ground, briefly parallel to the ground, then spun with his chakra encircling him, and Naruto felt a pulse of chakra emanate from him, pulling his right arm up slightly before swinging down his ninjutsu. Neji landed gracefully and rushed up to Naruto, who was now ready for Neji's rush, after Naruto was pushed back by his chakra and turned to regain his footing. In an attempt to strike Naruto's chest, Neji thrust his palm forward, but Naruto leapt to the left, and Neji followed up with a left palm, but Naruto somehow leaned back enough to avoid Neji's attack. As Neji attempted to jab his right index and middle fingers at Naruto's shoulder, Naruto spun around on his feet. Naruto saw the veins bursting around Neji's eyes and the distinct pupil in the middle of the normally plain silver eyes, which were the telltale signs of the Hayaga's renowned bloodline technique, the Byakugan, as all of Neji's attacks eventually shifted from palms to just the index and middle fingers. As Neji persisted in his attack, Naruto either sidestepped the blows or used his ninjutsu to block them, being cautious not to let his skin touch Neji's. Even among the adults with years of experience, he was a genius who was skilled in the art of the gentle fist, and he was very young, still a child, according to the rumors he had heard about a prodigy within the Hayagawa clan who was moving up the ranks and bringing more honors and pride to the already prestigious clan. Naruto was certain that he was up against the gentle fist genius, the prodigy of the Hayagawa clan. Naruto took advantage of Neji's overly forward body movement, sending his left fist beneath Neji's outstretched arm and driving it into his sternum. Neji coughed up some phlegm, but his instincts told him to keep his distance from the genius. Neji's right hand immediately sprang into action and started to close the chakra points in Naruto's entire left arm after Neji's left hand sprang out and grabbed hold of his left wrist. Naruto was able to save everything above his left elbow by swinging his ninjutsu at Neji's neck. Neji withdrew and flipped backwards. Naruto cursed as his left hand failed to react to any of the commands his brain sent it. 8 trigrams 60. 4 palms. The Hayagawa muttered, "You're in my field of divinity." Naruto knew what was going to happen next, and he didn't even blink. 20 of his chakra points were already closed, and the first 6 strikes sent his body flying, while the next 8 had him spinning in midair. He met Neji's gaze on the 16th palm, and they looked at each other. It was strange, and it happened rather quickly. Naruto was almost skeptical that it happened, but he couldn't deny it. Naruto was rolling across the clearing by the time the final palm struck. His body felt heavy and was not cooperating with his brain. His ninjutsu stayed in his right hand throughout the entire technique, but Naruto slowed down and stopped just before he fell into the river. He turned his head and stared at Neji, who was approaching him with some labored breathing, and stopped just as he was over Naruto, giving his right hand a calculating look. Neji kicked his hand, causing the ninjutsu to slide away from Naruto. "Are you finished?" Despite being a jonin, Neji had as much trouble from Naruto as his teammate Lee would have, so he asked while attempting to control his breathing. Neji smirked, deactivated his Byakugan, and grabbed his arm to help him up. Without asking, Neji reopened his chakra points. Naruto looked at his ninjutsu and then at Neji's eyes. He was tempted to use the explosive tag concealed in his weapon, but instead he smirked and raised his right arm, albeit with much more effort than usual. "When did you recognize that I was merely putting you through a test?" Neji inquired, and Naruto snorted while dusting off his black shorts and red sleeveless muscle shirt. "After you threw me into the air with a kick to the gut." He rubbed his stomach and replied, "That hurt, by the way." Neji laughed. After Neji countered, "It's not like you pulled any punches yourself." Naruto muttered something under his breath and followed Neji out of the clearing, most likely to return to Hinata or his mother. "Are you certain that it's feasible?" It was unnecessary to pretend that it didn't happen or that he didn't feel it because throughout the entire fight, Naruto could sense a conversation between them every time their punches and kicks made contact. Naruto asked hesitantly and without preamble. "I don't know Lady Uzumaki or Lord Hokage as well as Lady Hinata or Lord Hyuga, but I was present when they talked about their lovely baby boy." "It is the truth," Neji replied with assurance. "They gave him the name Naruto." "Whatever became of him?" "The baby, I mean," Naruto inquired, and Neji gave him a look that was impossible to interpret. "I shouldn't say that," Neji replied. "Besides, I'm not entirely sure myself," and Naruto sighed, recalling Minato's advice to ask questions of both himself and his mother. "So, when am I expected to complete this mission?" Naruto inquired. As they came to the street, Naruto and Neji halted their stroll and turned to face the Anbu, who bowed down to them. "Lord Namikaze," they said. Naruto responded somewhat harshly, "I'm not a Namikaze," and Neji gave him an elbow before Naruto snarled at him. Neji was emotionless. "Bye, polar bastard." Before standing, the Anbu apologized and said, "In any case, Lord Hokage wishes you attendance in his office." The Anbu then departed without hearing back from Naruto. "I have no option, do I?" When Naruto asked Neji, he noticed that he was grinning strangely. "Unless you want to resist." No, Naruto glared at Neji before continuing, saying, "It's okay if you do. I do need more exercise. The Hokage's office is in the other direction." Naruto paused, muttered some stern words, and then turned around. According to Naruto, "I'm still new here, give me a break," as Neji trailed behind him. Neji said, "You were supposed to make a right back there, following their roughly 200-foot walk. Stop talking, now. Where are you heading?" "I'm not sure." Before Naruto eventually located the Hokage Tower, this routine went on for approximately an hour. Neji sighed. With a hint of humor, Neji said, "Congratulations, I am now 100 years old." Naruto remained silent as he entered the tower and ascended to the Hokage's office, ignoring the secretary's attempts to stop him. He opened the door and entered. His eyes popped open, causing a flush to spread across his entire face and neck before he fell backwards. His body struck the ground as Neji entered, blushing too, albeit more subtly than Naruto. In silence, Neji shut the door and sighed as a tiny trickle of blood ran down his left nostril. Neji knelt down, placed his hands beneath Naruto's arms, and pulled him out. Inoki wasn't content. When Deidara, a failed shinobi, returned without his coveted weapon, he was told what had happened, which infuriated Inoki. How could that blonde menace take his only weapon of retaliation from him? But it was okay. Naruto would never support Konoha, even if it meant being tortured or killed. However, Inoki was not a fool. He knew that there might be a slim chance that the foolish tree lovers would somehow persuade Naruto to join them. Yes, everything will be alright. Konoha will still fall because of their own invention, their tool, and Inoki would be the mastermind behind it all. In that case, Naruto would have to be destroyed by Inoki before he could cause trouble. He was lucky to have spies following him all the time. "Lord Tsuchikage," Inoki said, turning his gaze to the door as a gentle voice called out to him and knocked. A moment later, a young, attractive woman with black hair entered, dressed in the typical Iwa uniform, and Inoki couldn't help but stare at her hair. "So elastic and springy." "Yes, sweetheart." When he asked, the woman bowed and handed him a neatly folded piece of paper, which he took, and she quickly left the room. Inoki thought this was strange, but after giving it some thought, he assumed it was because of his strong appearance and intimidating strength, and his pride and ego exploded. He read the note while mumbling aloud, and by the time he was done, the paper was crumbling in his hands. "If I were 20 years younger, he thought as he unfolded the note. There was nothing good about this. That conceited, pampered brat. As he mentally reread the note, Inoki growled, "They take away my tool? All right," Inoki said, rising slowly to avoid hurting his back, and making his way to the door. I need Roshi in my office before nightfall, now, he yelled, and the black-haired woman instantly appeared in front of him with her head bowed. The woman squeaked and nodded in response to his command before rushing back to her desk. After slamming the door behind him, Inoki went back to his office, glared at his desk, took a deep breath, and sat back behind it. It wouldn't be good to destroy his desk and everything else in his office, so he had to remain composed and wait for Roshi before explaining everything to him and leaving. The yellow flash would talk to him if he wanted to.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.